Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something a little sweatier, a little sandier, and a whole lot more awkward. We're going to ancient Egypt, but not for pyramids, pharaohs, or elaborate eyeliner tutorials. No, you've just woken up as a brothel worker. In Thebes, around 1250 BCE. It's hot, it's humiliating, and it's happening whether you like it or not. Welcome to a life where every glance might be a transaction, and every day starts with grit in your sandals and ends with incense failing to cover the shame. Before we dim the torches and set the mood, go ahead and like the video if you find historical misery oddly relaxing. Subscribe if you want more of this soft, sarcastic suffering in your ears. And drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and how late you're up. I'm always amazed at how many people around the world are trying to fall asleep to the sound of ancient despair. Now dim the lights, maybe light a candle that doesn't smell like sandalwood and desperation. Get comfortable and let's drift quietly back to a time when the Nile flooded, the gods judged, and your job involved strangers, sweat, and a lot of pretending. Congratulations, you've just regained consciousness. Not in your cosy bed, not in your climate-controlled apartment, but in a mud brick room in ancient Egypt. Thebes, specifically. It's the 19th dynasty, the reign of Ramesses VIII, the golden age of temples, bureaucracy, and heavily stylized wall art. Also, unfortunately, the golden age of your current occupation. The good news? You're technically employed. The bad news? You're a brothel worker in a society that talks a lot about Ma'at, balance and cosmic order, but somehow decided you were part of the acceptable chaos. Your name doesn't matter. No one will ask it. If they do, it's not because they want to remember it. You have a few aliases anyway. The one they use depends on what kind of man walked in and what kind of shame he's trying to forget. Some call you Little Flower, some call you Goddess, and one particularly uninspired drunk keeps calling you Pottery. You're not even sure what your real name is anymore. It got chipped away over time, like the faded paint on a tomb wall, replaced by nicknames, euphemisms, and transactional endearments shouted by people who barely make eye contact. You weren't always here. Nobody starts here. You were someone's daughter once, maybe someone's sister, a poor family's fourth child. Maybe your father died early. Maybe your mother remarried. Maybe you were sold. Or maybe you walked in willingly, thinking it'd be a better life than starving in the fields. And for the first 2 weeks, it was. Now you're part of the inventory. You're not a priestess. You're not one of those high-born temple attendants who pours wine and recites hymns in gold-trimmed linen. You're not covered in perfumed oils that, while playing the harp under a fig tree. You're the other kind. The kind people write about in warning stories. The kind that priests condemn in public and quietly visit at dusk. This is not a tale of glory. It's not even a tale. It's a long sigh echoing across centuries. And you're living it. Your body is not yours. It's the currency. You trade it for bread, for beer, for linen, for safety if you're lucky, for silence if you're not. The deal is simple. They come in, they leave, and you survive another day. The harder part is what happens in between, or afterward, or inside your own mind. There's no paperwork, no shift schedule, no tips, just the house madam, who tracks your worth with the same detached interest as someone counting grain sacks. She might offer you honey water if you look pale. Not out of kindness. Paleness doesn't sell. You don't get sick days. You don't get days. You just get darker circles under your eyes and stronger incense to hide the smell of whoever was here last. The walls are thin, the beds are thinner. Some are mats, some are pallets, some are just the floor and a woven blanket that never gets washed but never quite forgets. The room smells like heat, like sweat, like old lotus oil, and something else that's always vaguely metallic and vaguely familiar in the worst kind of way. You don't have a mirror, but you can see your reflection in the polished bronze tray you use to serve beer to clients. You don't stare long. Your own face feels like a rumour someone started years ago. Your eyes are tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from having to be alert all the time. You know which footsteps mean trouble. You know when a man's breath means he's going to cry, and when it means he's going to hit. You've developed a sixth sense, not for danger exactly, but for the very specific moment when hope walks out of the room and shuts the door behind it. And yet, every morning you wake up. You wake up when the sun floods through the slats in the wall. Not gently, it barges in like it owns the place. Because it does. The sun owns everything in Egypt. The land, the crops, the gods, the rhythm of life. And now it owns your eyelids. You're sticky with heat. The Nile humidity clings to your skin like a second, even less welcome layer of linen. Your mouth is dry, but not from thirst. From breathing through it all night to avoid the smell of your own straw mat. You sit up slowly, every joint groaning like it's trying to file a complaint. No one's listening. You adjust your wig. It's not yours, not really. Just a borrowed piece of palm fibre and sheep wool that's been dyed and perfumed within an inch of its life. The perfume is called kaifi, made from myrrh, cinnamon, and other things someone swore were holy. You suspect they also contain mild despair. You smear some red ochre on your lips. It's not lipstick. It's crushed beetles and burnt clay. But it makes your mouth look more alive. That matters. Men like mouths that look like they can lie well. Then you add a line of coal to your eyes, drawn with a stick so old it may have once belonged to an ibis god. The coal is lead-based, which means it gives you headaches and might slowly kill you. But at least you'll look great when it happens. Once your face is ready, you wrap your linen around yourself. It's more ceremonial than protective. Linen in this climate is like a tissue in a sandstorm, symbolic, flammable, and barely functioning. But it's what you're expected to wear. White if you're lucky. Brown if you've had to reuse it too many times. Sheer enough to remind everyone why you're here, but long enough to pretend modesty exists. You glance around the room. One of the other girls is already gone. That's either good or bad. Either she got an early client, or she didn't come back from last night. No one really asks anymore. Disappearances are part of the job. The madam appears in the doorway. She doesn't knock. She never does. She checks you over like a merchant checking produce for bruises. You smile. Not because you feel like it, but because she likes when you smile. You smile for the same reason statues smile, because it keeps people from asking questions. She nods once, satisfied. You're presentable, sellable, alive. Today you'll be called Little Lotus. Yesterday you were Joy of Ra. Tomorrow may be something involving fruit. The name doesn't matter. The story doesn't matter. All that matters is that the man walking in believes it just enough to hand over a copper ring or a clay jar of beer. And when he does, the door will close, the curtain will fall, and you'll go to work. There's no ceremony when the first client arrives. You don't hear trumpets. There's no lotus-scented breeze announcing his presence, Just footsteps, always footsteps, loud ones, soft ones, dragging ones. You learn to tell the difference. You learn that confidence usually means cruelty, and hesitation often smells like wine and apology. But you never really know until they speak. He doesn't greet you by name because he doesn't know it. He doesn't ask how you are because he's not here to listen. He might tell you you're beautiful, but only if he wants something discounted. He might insult you, but only if he's trying to forget someone else. He might say nothing at all, which is often worse. There's a kind of silence in these rooms that's different from other silences. Not the peace and quiet kind. More like the silence of someone choosing not to see what's directly in front of them. You light some incense, not because it masks the smell. It doesn't. But because it gives your hand something to do while he undresses. You smile again, not wide, just enough. You offer him wine. If he says yes, that's one type of visit. If he says no, that's another. You adjust your posture depending on which version of you he's come for today. And then it begins. And it ends. You detach. It's not poetic. It's not dramatic. It's practical. You let your mind float a few cubits above the bed. You go somewhere else. Somewhere dusty maybe, but clean. A place where no one's watching you and calling it affection. This isn't your body right now. It's a room someone's rented. You're just the furniture. Pretty, pliable, functional. You hum a tune in your head to drown out the breathing. Something you heard a street musician play once, back when you still noticed music. He leaves. He always leaves. Sometimes he throws a coin. Sometimes he forgets. Sometimes he says thank you like he means it, which is almost worse than when he doesn't say anything at all. You dress slowly afterward. You rewrap your linen. Reapply the ochre. Touch up the coal. You become the mask again. And then the next one comes. This is identity here. Not who you are, who you can pretend to be, again and again, without letting the pretending slip into forgetting. The other girls, they're the only people who really know you, not because you've told them everything, but because you haven't had to. You don't need words when you both understand what it means to be touched for money by someone who thinks you're invisible as soon as they finish. You learn each other's silence. You speak in glances, shrugs, eye rolls, and once in a while, laughter. Not the free kind, the brittle kind that sounds like it's been sharpened on heartbreak. You all have stories. How you got here, why you stayed, who you lost. No one tells theirs in full, because what's the point? The ending is always the same. You either age out, waste away, or disappear into the back rooms where the madam keeps the girls who no longer sell the illusion. They're still alive, technically, but they don't talk much. They just sit, wrapped in faded linen, and stare at walls like they're waiting for the paint to peel into prophecy. You tell yourself you won't end up like that. Not because you believe it, but because the alternative is acknowledging how many women once said the same thing. At night, if you're not working, you sit outside the brothel, near the river. The Nile never judges, it just moves. Thick, slow, eternal. You watch the boats drifting past, listen to frogs in the reeds, smell the faint traces of fish and mud and life. You wonder what it would be like to sail away, to vanish upstream, become someone else in a village that's never heard your nickname. But even fantasy is tiring after a while. You head back inside, you pass the shrine on the way. A small alcove carved into the mud brick wall. It's dedicated to Hathor, goddess of love, pleasure and motherhood. The irony is not lost on you. Her face is serene, painted in ochre and faded gold. She looks down at you like she understands, like she might have once worked your job in another life. Some girls pray to her, some curse her. Most just nod in a direction and keep walking. You did try praying once, a long time ago. You asked for a better life, a kinder client, a second chance. But the only thing that changed was your voice getting hoarse. Now you pray only with your actions, gentle ones, tiny ones, fixing someone's fallen strap, pouring an extra splash of wine, giving a tired girl your turn at the cleaner mat. These small kindnesses are the only offerings you have left. There's a rumour in the brothel that one of the girls, Neshi, used to be a nobleman's mistress, that she had real jewellery once, gold, lapis, carnelian, that she was educated, could even write her name. Now she braids hair for tips and sleeps beside a pot of sour milk. No one knows if it's true. Doesn't matter. Truth isn't the currency here. Reputation is. And hers is now discounted. You wonder what your story will sound like, years from now, when someone else tells it. If anyone tells it. Maybe they'll say you were beautiful. Maybe they'll say you were clever. Maybe they'll forget you altogether, and your life will be nothing more than a name someone half remembers and mispronounces while passing a crumbling ruin. You've seen the hieroglyphs carved into the back walls. Crude ones mostly. Jokes, insults, the occasional obscene drawing. One of them says, "Nanu gives better service than Bastet." You're not Nanu, but you've met her. She's missing 2 teeth and once bit a man hard enough that he paid double. Sometimes you wonder if this is what immortality means. Being remembered for the worst part of your life, scratched into stone by someone who never bothered to ask how your day went. Your thoughts get interrupted by the return of the madam. She has that look, something between a sneer and fake concern. It's your turn again. Someone's asking for the one with the tired eyes. You don't need to ask which one that is. You just stand, straighten your linen, and smile. Always smile. He's younger than usual, barely older than you. Nervous. Probably his first time. He talks too much at first. About the weather, the taxes, the beer he drank to get the courage to come here. You nod. You listen. You pretend this moment means something. You guide him gently. You pretend you're flattered. You tell him what he needs to hear. When he leaves, he thanks you. Not casually, sincerely. Like you just saved his soul. You wait until the curtain falls before you let your shoulders drop. It's not the worst interaction you've had. Not by a long shot. But it still takes something from you. Something you weren't offering. Later, when you wash your face with cool water from the jar outside, you stare at your reflection in the ripple. You try to remember your mother's face. You try to remember your own as a child. You try to remember what it felt like to be wanted for something that wasn't this. Memory is a tricky thing in this place. It either leaves too fast or stays too long. One of the older girls says you should stop thinking so much, that it makes the job harder, that the trick is to become hollow, just enough to keep going. You believe her? But part of you resists. Some small piece refuses to be erased completely. It doesn't scream. It doesn't fight. It just watches quietly from the back of your soul. A client once said you had wise eyes. You didn't know what to say to that. Wise doesn't pay extra. Wise just means tired in a flattering tone. That night, you sleep on your mat, arms crossed over your stomach like the statues in the tombs. The linen is damp from the heat. You hear the frogs again, out near the river. You count them instead of sheep. Frogs don't judge. Frogs don't ask for discounts. Frogs just croak in the dark, unapologetically loud, like they own the place. Maybe they do. You drift off eventually, not into dreams, just into stillness. A place where your name doesn't matter, where you're not Little Lotus, or Joy of Ra, or Pottery. Just someone breathing softly in the dark. And in the morning you'll do it all again, because that's who you are now. Not a name, not a past, just a pattern. Some mornings you wake up before the sun. Not because you're rested, no one here remembers what rested feels like, but because your body has learned how to anticipate suffering. Like a cat twitching its ears before a storm, you just know. The air gets still. The floor feels heavier. Something in the silence warns you. Today will be worse than usual. You sit up slowly, already bracing. One of your ankles is stiff from the way you slept. You flex it gently, testing it like a cracked pot. The mat beneath you shifts, releasing a small cloud of dust and regret. You cough once, then again. Then you stop, because coughing draws attention, and attention isn't always the good kind. You reach for your linen and find it damp. Of course it is. Nothing dries properly in this heat. Nothing smells clean. Even freshly laundered clothes smell like the Nile with a fever. You wrap it around you anyway, pulling it tighter than necessary, like maybe the fabric can keep something in. Your dignity, your fear, your barely held together sense of self. It can't, but you do it anyway. Someone in the next room is arguing. You can't make out the words, just the tone, desperate, wheedling. Maybe she's begging the madam for the day off. Maybe she's trying to explain that her eye is swollen shut because she fell. You don't look. You've seen it before. The madam doesn't yell. She rarely has to. Her voice is sharp but quiet, the kind that makes you want to shrink just to avoid being noticed. She ends the argument with a simple line you've heard too many times. Clients don't pay to hear your problems. It's her mantra. Her business model. Her lullaby for the broken. You stand and step outside, just for a moment. The sun is rising, staining the sky in pinks and oranges that would be beautiful if you weren't standing barefoot in a muddy courtyard, squinting through the smoke of the neighbour's breakfast fire. Somewhere, a rooster crows, like it's proud of itself. Somewhere else, someone throws up. Both are familiar sounds. You walk to the cistern and splash water on your face. It's cold, sharp, like the world slapping you awake. You exhale slowly, then go back inside. You pass a younger girl on the way in. New. Maybe 16, though she says she's 19. They all say they're older. It's safer. Her makeup is too heavy. Her hair is done up in a style that says she still thinks presentation matters. Her walk is nervous and hopeful. She hasn't learned yet how to ration her smiles. You nod to her. She nods back, unsure if you're a friend or a warning. You don't clarify. You lie down again. Not to rest, but to preserve energy. It's going to be another long day. They all are. The house never really closes. There's no closed sign, no quiet hours. If someone shows up at midnight with coin and a need, the door opens. That's the rule. Desire doesn't keep a schedule. Neither does despair. Your mind drifts, as it often does, to what might have been. If you'd been born a man, maybe you'd be hauling bricks in the temple fields. Your hands would be calloused, your back bent, but your body wouldn't be public property. If you'd been born richer, maybe you'd be sitting under a sycamore, fanning yourself while a servant brings dates and cool beer. But then again, rich girls have their cages too. Yours is just less decorated. Sometimes you think about running, disappearing into the marketplace crowd, slipping away down some alley, never looking back. But run where? To whom? Your face is known. Your walk is known. Your absence would be noted and filled. The madam has ways of finding people. And even if she didn't, the world outside isn't exactly lined with welcome mats and fresh starts. You're not naive. You know how runaways end up. Back in another brothel, with another madam and the same smile. So instead, you stay. You develop rituals. Little things that feel like control. You fold your linen the same way every night. You hide a small bead under your mat. Blue faience, chipped at the edge, worthless to anyone else, but yours. You count the tiles on the ceiling when a client talks too much. You whisper your real name into your own hand once a week, just to hear it out loud. These are your acts of rebellion. Quiet, private, persistent. A travelling merchant once stayed for 3 nights in a row. He brought a fig with him. Just one. Ripe, dark, sweet. He handed it to you without ceremony. You almost cried. Not because of the fig itself, but because for a brief moment someone saw you. Or seemed to. The fig tasted like memory. You saved the seeds. You still have one in a scrap of linen under your bed. It will never grow, but that's not the point. That seed is your insurance policy against becoming entirely hollow. The priest who comes every month never speaks. He just breathes, fast and anxious, like the gods might be watching and judging, but he's too far gone to care. You wonder what he prays for when he leaves. You wonder if he feels cleaner after unburdening himself into someone who doesn't have the luxury of shame anymore. He leaves a copper ring behind. It's been bent twice, once by accident, once in anger. You wear it sometimes, not because it's pretty, but because it makes you feel like someone whose hand deserves to hold something. Occasionally, a client asks you what you dream about. It's meant to be romantic, like he's trying to convince himself you're still a person. You never tell the truth. You tell him something vague. Sunlight, flowers, flying. You don't tell him the real dream. The one where you walk through a temple corridor, empty and echoing, until you reach a doorway that leads nowhere, just blackness. And you step through it anyway, because even a void is better than here. You hear footsteps again. You rise. You smile. You adjust the linen. There's no beginning to this work. No end. No first day, no retirement party. It just is. A loop carved into time. A pattern older than any dynasty. You play your part because the alternative is unthinkable, and thinking too much here is a liability. You breathe in, you breathe out. He enters. You begin again. Your room is 4 steps across, 3 steps wide, and 1 cracked clay lamp short of collapsing into full-on metaphor. The walls are made of mud brick, sun-dried, chipped, flaking at the corners like ancient scabs. They trap heat during the day and release it slowly at night, so the air inside never feels entirely breathable. More like you're living in someone's exhale. There's no window, just a narrow slit in the wall that allows a faint beam of light to crawl in around noon, like it's embarrassed to be seen here. Sometimes a fly gets in, sometimes a mouse. Once, you swear it was a snake, but by the time you screamed, it had already vanished into the thatching of the roof, like a whisper nobody wanted to acknowledge. Your ceiling is not so much a ceiling as a polite suggestion that the skies stay out. It's palm fronds, mud, woven reeds, and the ongoing prayers of whoever installed it. When it rains, and it does, rarely, violently, you get a drip right over your mat. The leak has a rhythm now. It keeps time better than most musicians. Tap, tap, tap. You've named it Tefnut, after the goddess of moisture. She's both comforting and cruel. There's a small shelf near the doorway. You keep exactly 3 things on it. A half-empty jar of coal, a chipped ceramic cup, and a dried flower someone once gave you after a long night. You don't remember who. Maybe it was a client. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was you, trying to remember what gentleness looks like. The petals are brown now, curling in on themselves. A little like your hands when you sleep. Your mat is made of straw, flattened and stained by time and bodies. It crunches when you shift, not because it's dry, but because it remembers too much. You cover it with a piece of linen that used to be white. Now it's beige, edged with sleep, sweat, and the faded outline of someone else's regrets. You don't decorate. There's nothing here to show your personality, because personality is a luxury, and luxuries draw the wrong kind of attention. A decorated room says you care. A cared-for space says you have something to lose, so you keep it simple, empty, clean in the way absence can sometimes be mistaken for peace. The floor is packed dirt, cool in the morning, hot by afternoon, and gritty always. It's sprinkled with sand that never stays outside no matter how many times you shake your feet before entering. Sand is Egypt's most consistent visitor. It arrives uninvited, settles in everything, and leaves behind stories no one asked to read. Sometimes, when you lie on your back and stare at the ceiling, you imagine what the sky looks like beyond it. You know it's blue, bright, endless, but all you ever see is the inside of your own enclosure. The roof is your sky now, and it leaks. Outside, things aren't better, just different. The brothel sits near the edge of the city, close enough to be accessible, far enough to be disrespected. People pass by all the time, priests, scribes, fishermen, soldiers, pretending they don't see you, except when they do, and then it's too much. A glance too long, a smirk too knowing, a silence too judgmental. The streets around you are narrow, dusty, and lined with cracked walls painted with old propaganda. Images of gods, pharaohs, promises. Some are chipped away, like the dreams they once inspired. Children run past occasionally, barefoot and loud, chasing each other through alleyways like they're fleeing time itself. You envy their energy. You mourn their future. The air smells like heat, which shouldn't be a scent, but somehow is. It's dry and heavy, carrying notes of dung, date syrup, sweat, river rot, and something faintly metallic, blood, maybe, or bronze, or memory. Flies are everywhere, not the occasional apologetic kind. These are bold, territorial, numerous. They follow you like unpaid debts, land on your face mid-sentence, and treat your food like a communal offering. You swat them away without looking, like swatting down old rumours. At the edge of the courtyard is the latrine, a clay pit with a wood cover, and the quiet despair of everyone who's ever used it. There's no privacy, no dignity, just function. You've stopped noticing the smell, which might be worse than noticing it. You wipe with whatever's available. Linen scraps, palm fibres, sometimes just prayer. Bathing happens in shifts. There's a basin, a jug, and a curtain that doesn't quite reach the ground. Water is rationed. Soap is a concept, not a product. You scrub with sand sometimes. Other times with crushed lotus petals and oil. If someone rich is visiting, and the madam wants you to smell more expensive than you are. When you do bathe, you savour it. Not because it makes you feel clean, nothing really does, but because it reminds you that your body still exists beneath all the performance. You watch the water turn cloudy with the dust of your day. You whisper to it. Sometimes apologies, sometimes warnings, sometimes nothing at all. Noise never stops, day or night. You hear temple bells in the morning, the low chant of prayers rising like smoke. You hear merchants haggling, donkeys braying, wheels creaking over stone. At dusk, the city shifts. It gets softer, heavier. Drunken laughter starts to leak into the alleyways, mixing with the murmur of arguments, the occasional sharp yelp, the unmistakable thud of someone falling or being pushed. At night, the world hums. You hear music from taverns, off-key lyres, clapping, shouting. Somewhere, someone's always crying. Somewhere else, someone's trying very hard not to. You hear the slap of sandals in the dust, the rustle of linen, the final creak of the brothel's door being bolted. Too late, too little. The walls of your room do nothing to block sound. You hear every cough, every moan, every whispered deal. You know who's working and who's pretending. You know who's good at faking joy and who's given up on pretending. You know when a scream means something bad, and when it just means business as usual. You also hear the gods. Not directly, of course. They don't lower themselves to conversation. But you hear their presence in the temple drums, in the chanting priests, in the whispered fears of clients who beg you to make them feel forgiven. You know which gods the girls prefer. Hathor for comfort, Bastet for protection, Anubis for an end. You once carved a tiny eye of Horus into the corner of your shelf. Not because you believe it'll help, but because it's something to look at that isn't the wall. This is your environment, not a room, not a brothel. A living organism that breathes you in and spits you out daily, dressed in perfume and apology. And yet, somehow, you survive here. Not thrive, not flourish, just survive, like a stubborn weed in the crack of a sun-baked wall. Not pretty, not wanted, but persistent. You adapt, your skin thickens, your hearing sharpens, your senses evolve to track danger by tone, posture, and the slight shift of someone's shadow at your door. You sleep with one arm over your stomach, a pose you learned from another girl who said it helps hold things in. Your breath, your nerves, your secrets. You learn to walk without making noise, to smile without showing teeth, to nod without agreeing, to fold your linen in such a way that it hides the bruises and highlights the curves. You learn that no one's coming to save you. You learn that surviving is its own kind of sacred. There's a courtyard just behind the brothel. It's not a garden. That would imply intention, effort, perhaps something growing. This is more of a shared dust pit surrounded by crumbling walls and baked-in secrets. A single fig tree leans tiredly in one corner, as if trying to escape through the stone. Its leaves are sparse, its shadow barely functional. But it's the closest thing to beauty you get, so people pretend. Sometimes the girls sit out here between clients. They don't talk much. Mostly they just breathe, or watch the flies, or press their feet into the dirt to remind themselves they still exist from the knees down. You join them sometimes. You don't call it a break. You don't call it anything. You just exist beside each other in silence, surrounded by the gentle decay of mud brick and lost ambitions. The sun never fully leaves this place. Even in shade, even at dusk, it hovers like a landlord checking for unpaid rent. You're always sweating, always glistening. You learn to move slowly, not for elegance, but because speed costs moisture, and moisture is something your body can't spare. Some girls faint in the heat. They get water, maybe a moment inside, but not rest. Rest is a myth, a beautiful one, embroidered in temple reliefs and bedtime lies. You've stopped asking for it. Inside, the air isn't much better. It's thicker, stagnant, steeped in the scent of warmed bodies, old oil, burnt resin, and whatever passed for disinfectant 3 dynasties ago. The walls absorb everything, sound, sweat, fear, and hold on to it like a miser with copper. You swear you can hear last week's arguments echoing under the current ones. The building groans sometimes, not loudly, just enough to remind you that it's older than any of you, older than your profession, older than most lies. The door hinges squeal, the steps creak, the rafters creak louder. Occasionally you hear something fall in another room and no one bothers to check. If it's important, someone will scream. If not, it wasn't meant to last anyway. Light here is either too much or too little. Midday sun pours through the doorway like punishment. By nightfall, everything glows in muted amber, courtesy of low burning oil lamps that spit more smoke than illumination. Shadows gather in corners like rumours, overlapping and muttering to each other. There's no furniture except what's needed. A few mats, a few stools, a basin here, a chipped bowl there. Storage is just cloth bundles under beds, half buried in dust. No one keeps much. You learn not to grow attached to objects, or people, or sleep. You notice over time how sound moves in this place. How the laughter of a man in the front room always precedes bad news. How the sound of coins being counted travels faster than light. How silence, true silence, is rare, and never a good sign. You also notice the animals, not pets, not companions, just co-inhabitants. Mice live in the walls. They dart between cracks, chew at discarded bread, and vanish the moment a foot moves. Lizards skitter across the floor, blinking slowly like they understand things you never will. Once, a scorpion found its way into the linen pile. That was a fun evening. The madame killed it with a sandal, and then docked the girl's wages for attracting bad spirits. You've never trusted sandals since. The brothel shares a wall with a tavern. You know this because you can hear every curse, cheer, and poorly tuned lute from sundown to the middle of whatever passes for night. It's not music. It's a noise with ambition. Men sing sometimes, badly, off-key and too loud. You hear their cups clink, their fists thud, their chairs scrape. Sometimes you hear someone sobbing quietly in the alley afterward. You never go look. You already know what you'll see. Another man who thought the drink would erase him and got disappointed. The people around here pretend not to know what the building is. They avert their eyes during the day, but their feet find the threshold at night. They whisper the word house of pleasure, like it's a spell. You prefer house of sweat and lies. It's more accurate, less poetic, more honest. You remember your first week here. How every creak, every rustle, every half-heard groan made you flinch. How you tried to clean your mat with citrus peel, convinced the smell would help. It didn't. The flies still came. The men still came. The hope did not. Now you don't clean much. You organise, you tidy, you maintain a semblance of control. The difference is important. Cleaning suggests a return to something pure. You know better than to expect that. Nothing here was ever pure. Not the walls, not the water, not the linen. Especially not the people. There's a girl upstairs who swears she saw a nobleman come through once. Not disguised. Not ashamed. just walking in like he owned the place. Which, in a way, he probably did. She said his hands were clean. That's how you know he's not from here. Hands here are always covered in something. Dust, oil, guilt, ink, lies. The clean ones don't last. Or they don't care. You've seen a scribe visit, twice a month. Always brings his own cup. Refuses to sit unless the mat looks fresh. Talks a lot about poetry, papyrus, and the beauty of language. You smile and nod, even when you don't understand half of what he says. He never asks what you think. Just assumes your silence is admiration. It isn't. It's the sound of someone measuring how long he'll last before he breaks like the rest. Your room is in the back. Slightly cooler, slightly quieter, slightly more forgotten. You like it that way. You can hear the frogs better from there. You can smell the river when the wind shifts. You keep a bowl of ash under your bed, not for magic, just to absorb the smell of mildew. Every few weeks, you dump it out behind the latrine and start fresh. It's your version of spring cleaning. One of the windows, near the main entrance, is covered with a faded cloth. Behind it, sometimes, a man will watch. Not always the same one, just a shape. You catch him from the corner of your eye, never speaks, never enters, just watches. The madam says he's harmless. You don't believe her. Nothing that quiet is ever harmless. At the edge of the courtyard, there's a half-buried amulet. No one knows where it came from. It's shaped like a scarab, chipped at the edge, glazed in what used to be turquoise. Some girls spit on it when they walk past. Others bow their heads. You just step over it every time. Whatever power it had, it left long before you arrived. There are rumours of a temple nearby that houses sacred women, priestesses of Hathor. Worship through ritual, music, movement, holy service. Some say it's the same as what you do, but with incense and better wages. You wouldn't know. You've never seen it. The girls who talk about it the most are the ones least likely to ever leave. You're used to the bugs now. The nighttime itching. The rustle of something winged landing too close to your ear. You no longer swat unless you know it bites. You've adapted. You scratch in patterns. You've mapped your own body like a territory. The places that bleed, the places that sting, the places you pretend don't hurt. And when the day ends, if it ever really ends, you lie back on your mat, listening to the brothel breathe. You hear the building creak. You hear a girl whispering a prayer. You hear a man groan in sleep or pain or both. You hear the wind push sand through the cracks in the door. You don't close your eyes yet. Not until the noises fade. Not until you're sure the walls won't ask anything else of you tonight. Then, and only then, do you rest. Not sleep. That would imply dreams. You don't get those anymore. The thing about living in a brothel, especially one as sun-baked and structurally suspicious as this, is that time doesn't behave the way it's supposed to. It stretches, curls, recoils. Mornings feel like afterthoughts. Nights feel like sentences. Entire afternoons vanish without explanation, swallowed by the haze of heat and routine. You stop marking days with calendars. Instead, you count them by the sound of certain footsteps, the smell of the Nile breeze, or whether the roof leaks at noon or 2. Seasons mean very little. The concept of winter is almost a joke. Summer just becomes a permanent condition. There's hot, and then there's Egyptian hot, which is less about temperature and more about being slowly roasted inside a linen pouch while your own sweat betrays you. Shade offers no real comfort. It's like being told the executioner's blade will be slightly duller today, still going to hurt, just with more texture. Just with. Inside, the brothel swells with heat until it's a living thing, panting through its cracks and gaps. You don't breathe so much as sip the air, warm and stale, like drinking from a shared bowl of disappointment. If there's a breeze, it carries dust. If there's no breeze, it carries silence. You learn to live in both. And then there's the smell. Not one smell, a blend. A signature bouquet of unwashed linen, dried sweat, crushed insects, incense resin, body oil, and the faint, ever-present ghost of old copper coins. Not unpleasant exactly, just constant. The scent becomes part of you. It lingers in your hair, your hands, the crease behind your knees. Even when you bathe, even when you scrub raw, it returns. Like the job itself. Like memory. Outside, the world performs normalcy. Vendors shout about fish. Bread sellers wave their wares like they're sacred offerings. A man drags a dead goat through the alley, hooves thumping like an accusation. Children run by with wooden hoops, an unconvincing optimism. Everyone plays their role. You stay inside. Your world is small. Your view smaller. You see life through a curtain, a cracked door, the gap beneath the roofline. You watch the city without being part of it. You are not of Thebes. You are in it, like a bad dream hiding in someone else's waking life. The brothel has no name, at least not officially. Among the girls it's called the oven, because stepping inside feels like being slow baked in regret. Others call it the tomb, mostly on bad days. You prefer the machine, because it eats people, makes them useful, spits them out. Nothing spiritual about it, just gears and labour and entropy. You've learned which floorboards groan when stepped on, which door hinges shriek, and which ones lie. You know that the second mat in the left corridor is cursed. 3 girls fainted on it in 1 month. You never sit there. Not out of superstition. Out of statistics. The rooms all look the same. Mud brick, mat, jar, curtain. Misery arranged in slightly different angles. You've stood in almost all of them at one point or another. Sometimes because someone else passed out. Sometimes because a guest requested variety. Sometimes because a ceiling in your usual spot was threatening to fall, and the madam decided structural integrity was optional unless it directly affects revenue. You've seen the ceiling fall once. The plaster cracked mid-session and rained down like dry snow. The man screamed. You didn't. He left. You swept it up. That was it. You talk to the walls sometimes. Not in the way that makes people worry. Quietly. Casually. Like roommates. You tell them your aches. You ask them for breeze. You beg them not to collapse tonight. They never answer, which in this place feels merciful. There's a cat who visits sometimes. Grey, one eye missing. Tail kinked like a bent reed. No name, no collar, no allegiance. It comes in through the roof and sleeps on your mat like it pays rent. You don't shoo it, you let it stay. Because when it curls beside you, warm and indifferent, you remember what comfort used to feel like. You once whispered a secret into its fur. Nothing important, just something you hadn't said out loud in a while. The cat blinked, licked its paw, left. You pretended that was a form of acceptance. Noise is its own climate here. You hear everything. Not because the walls are thin, but because privacy doesn't exist in rooms built for transaction. You hear the men, grunts, moans, laughter that feels misplaced. You hear the girls, fake gasps, whispered curses, occasional weeping held under the breath like a guilty thought. You hear the madam's sandals clicking down the hall, the universal rhythm of control and performance review. And at night, if you're lucky, you hear almost nothing. Just the distant croak of frogs. the sigh of wind over rooftops, the click of your own jaw as you unclench it for the first time in hours. You don't think about escape anymore, not because it's impossible, because it's irrelevant. The world beyond the brothel isn't cleaner, just different kinds of dirt. Fields, temples, kitchens. Each has its version of you, bent and anonymous, working under different titles for the same end. You've seen girls leave. Some come back, some don't. You don't ask, you don't judge. You just make space on the mat and keep folding your linen. Even the stars feel distant here. You catch glimpses of them sometimes when the smoke clears and the lights are out. They're faint, silver dots pretending they still have meaning. People used to navigate by them. Sailors, nomads, dreamers. Now they're just decoration on a ceiling no one's allowed to reach. A client once called you his guiding star, then forgot your name 5 minutes later. Still, you looked up that night and tried to find your constellation. Nothing special. Just a corner of the sky that felt like it didn't belong to anyone else. You named it after your sister. She died young. Fever or famine or both. You were too little to remember, but you remember the name. You say it under your breath sometimes, just to hear something sacred echo against the mud brick. The madam keeps a shrine in the front room. Not for clients, for herself. A tiny table with oil offerings, a few wilted lotus flowers, a crude clay figure of Taweret, the goddess of childbirth and protection. Ironic, maybe, but also honest. The line between birth and ruin here is thin. Everyone clings to whatever god will let them sleep. You don't pray, not properly, not anymore. But you still speak to things. To the scarab in the dirt. To the breeze that doesn't arrive. To your own reflection in the water basin, warped and wincing. To the girl across the hall, who hasn't spoken in days but still lines her lips with ochre each morning. These are your altars, cracked, dusty, yours. And when the night finally quiets, when the last door clicks shut, when the cat returns, when the brothel exhales its final breath for the day, you lie on your mat, arms crossed, eyes open, listening, not for danger, not even for hope, just for the sound of the building settling, like a tired god slumping back into sleep. Work starts before anyone knocks, before the door opens, before you hear footsteps, before the sun's even high enough to cast judgment. Your body wakes up already braced, already taut, like it remembers the job before you do. The muscles in your back don't stretch anymore. They negotiate. Your joints click like old tools. Your neck carries the posture of a woman trying not to appear smaller, but not quite daring to take up space either. You rise slowly. You test your weight on each foot, like you're not sure if today is the day one of them gives out. Your first breath is shallow, the second one deeper. By the third, you've remembered who you are again. What you do? What version of yourself you have to wear today? There's no uniform here. Not really. Just linen. Light. Sheer. Breathable. If such a word can apply to cloth that smells like old incense and older sweat. You don't dress to impress. You dress to suggest. You wrap the fabric like it's hiding something, even though it never really does. A glimpse of thigh, a shoulder exposed, a half full of coal-smeared lashes. It's performance, not pleasure. The madam does a walkthrough just after breakfast. She doesn't eat, she inspects. Hair, eyes, posture, skin. She lifts your chin with 2 fingers. Not gentle, not cruel, just business. And studies you the way a farmer studies a goat's teeth. You say nothing. You hold still. She nods once. You're cleared for work. And so it begins. There is no shift, no start time, no schedule pinned to the wall. The day happens to you the way a storm happens to a boat. Slowly, then all at once. Clients come when they come. Sometimes in waves, sometimes in threes, sometimes a gap long enough to think you might get a nap, only for a messenger to shout your name through the curtain a minute later. You don't choose them, they choose you. Sometimes they choose wrong. Sometimes they want the youngest girl. Sometimes they want the loudest. Sometimes they ask for someone who doesn't cry. You've been all three, depending on the mood of the Nile and the weight of your own exhaustion. Today you're soft. That's what the madam told you. That's your role. You smile accordingly. The first client is a soldier. He smells like iron, leather, and impatience. He doesn't speak much, just nods, tosses a handful of barley coins onto the stool, and undoes his belt with the casual detachment of someone cleaning their weapon. You lead him into the room. You don't ask questions. Questions delay things. He doesn't want a conversation. He wants forgetfulness. So you provide it. You've perfected the look. The one that says, "I'm here, but not entirely." It comforts them. Lets them pretend. Lets them project. You become someone else for them. Not just once. Dozens of times a day. It's a constant shapeshift. A spiritual contortion. The girl who laughs. The girl who listens. The one who bites. The one who doesn't flinch. There's a ritual to it. The greeting, the wine, the linen. The brief spark of eye contact that says, "This is happening." Then the act itself. Not love, not desire. A function. A performance with no script, but lots of improvisation. Every man thinks he's the only one. That's the rule. That's the lie. And you sell it because selling the lie is safer than selling the truth. When he finishes, he says nothing. Just adjusts his belt, picks up his coins, he always counts them again, and leaves. You sit there for a minute. Not long. Just enough to remind your body that you're still inside it. Then you straighten the mat, rinse the bowl, wipe your face, fix your hair, smile again, repeat. Next one's a priest. You know him. They all have tells. His is the way he avoids eye contact, even as he lifts your chin with 2 fingers like he's inspecting a sacrificial offering. He talks a lot during. Something about forgiveness. About how you remind him of a goddess. Hathor, probably. Maybe Isis if he's feeling self-important. You don't listen. Not fully. You hum softly, just loud enough to give the illusion of interest. He takes longer than the soldier. Not physically, spiritually. He needs more pretending. He needs you to act like this is meaningful. That you feel something. You do. Nausea. He leaves a scrap of linen behind. On purpose, he always does. You hand it to the madam. She burns it. Lunch is a handful of dried figs and a crust of barley bread so tough it could double as a weapon. You chew slowly. You don't sit down. The floor is still being mopped. Mop, in this case, and meaning a rag dipped in perfumed water that used to be white and now resembles a retired dish rag. One of the girls jokes about it. You laugh. It sounds convincing, even to you. The afternoon brings heat. Not just in the air, but on your skin. It gathers under your arms, behind your knees, between your thighs. You reapply the coal. Not for vanity, for defence. It makes your eyes look bigger, more alert, less dead. That matters. By now you're halfway through your day and 3/4 through your energy. The next client is drunk. Drunks are wild cards. Some cry. Some sing. Some forget why they're here halfway through and apologise. This one wants to talk. You nod. smile, respond where expected. He tells you about his wife, his father, a dream he had about a crocodile. You wonder briefly what your life would be like if you had a job that didn't involve hearing strangers' secrets at close range while pretending to care. He touches your shoulder like he's never touched a person before. You lean in, not because you want to, but because that's the protocol. That's the muscle memory, that's the script. You close your eyes, count to 10. When you open them, he's done. He leaves a copper ring on the mat. You give it to the madam, she keeps it. You change linen again. Not because it's fresh, just different. The stain pattern tells a different story. And by now, your job is mostly telling stories with your body, your posture, your breath. This one says you're experienced, mature, that you've seen things. This one is for the older clients who like to pretend they're not sad. It works. You survive 2 more sessions before dusk. Your thighs ache, your back knots, your stomach clenches. You chew fennel seeds to suppress the urge to throw up. You catch yourself in the bronze mirror. You look normal. That's the scariest part. You look like someone who's okay, like someone who chose this. And in a way, you did. Not the way people mean. Not with options, not with choices, but with the understanding that starving on the street or being someone's unpaid property weren't better. You chose the thing that let you keep some form of self, some control, even if it's in the way you part your hair or how you say a client's name. The girl across the hall vomits. No one asks why. No one asks anything. One of the others hands her water. That's it. Empathy is quick here, efficient. Small acts, never loud. You learn to take comfort in the way someone steadies your elbow when you wobble, or hands you the better mat on a bad day. There is love here. It's just buried under function. Dinner is gruel, not a poetic word, just what it is. Warmish, thick, the colour of regret. You swallow it with the speed of someone trying not to taste. A fly lands on your lip. You don't flinch. The madam announces that a nobleman is coming tonight. Everyone reacts. Quietly. Nobles mean coin. Nobles mean risk. Nobles mean someone might cry afterward. You don't volunteer. You don't refuse. You just lower your gaze slightly and let someone else take the bait. Yeah, your last client of the day is a fisherman. Broad hands, soft voice. He asks if you're tired. You lie. He laughs. Says he knows you're lying, but doesn't press. You lie with him. Not just physically, emotionally. You let your eyes soften. You let your voice drop. You make him believe he's the best you've had today. He leaves smiling. You don't. The hardest part of the work isn't the clients. It isn't the bruises they sometimes leave, or the way they say your name like they're trying it on, or how they linger after finishing like they expect you to bless the transaction with false affection. It isn't the sweat, or the stretch of your jaw, or the way your spine folds over time like it's trying to curl into a smaller, safer version of you. No, the hardest part is pretending that none of it matters. Pretending that every knock on the door isn't a toll bell. That every compliment isn't just bait on a hook. That the girl who stopped showing up last week just left for a better opportunity and didn't get buried quietly in the alley behind the grain mill. You learn not to ask questions you can't afford to hear the answers to. The madam never confirms anything. Just shifts the mat, changes the name on the wall, tells the next girl to smile wider this time, and keep the conversation short. You obey, not out of fear, but out of conditioning. You were trained long before you ever arrived, by poverty, by silence, by watching the way power moves through a room and realising it never walks in your direction. By evening, your body is no longer yours. It's a borrowed tool, worn at the edges, tender in the places where you smile too much, arch too often, kneel too long. You soak your feet in a basin of tepid water, not because it helps, but because it feels like the thing to do. You press a cloth to your chest to ease the bruising. You dab balm behind your ears, not to smell nice, but to disguise the stench of someone who wanted you to call him master for 20 breathless minutes and then cried after. There's no time to fall apart. There's barely time to exhale. The girls who crack get reassigned. The ones who scream stop being useful. The ones who care too much about what's happening to them start looking tired. And tired doesn't sell. Not unless a man specifically requests it. Some do. They like the ones who look like they've given up. It makes them feel powerful. Like they're reviving something. You have a technique. Everyone does. Yours is stillness. You let them come to you. You move slowly, gracefully, like something sacred. You act like the act is a ritual. It gives them the illusion that they're part of something important, that you're giving them something holy. It works more often than you'd like. Others have different methods. Sarai uses laughter. Big, fake, radiant laughter that makes men think they're charming. Merit uses stories. Little lies about dreams and adventures and family members who never existed. She changes her background every week. One day she's from a fishing village, the next from a palace. No one questions it. They're not here for continuity. One girl just stares. She never speaks unless spoken to. Her eyes are dark, unreadable. Men like her because they can project anything onto her blankness. She's a mirror for their fantasies. You asked her once how she keeps from screaming. She said, "I let it happen in my head." Then she smiled like that was the most normal sentence in the world. Maybe it is. The madam pays in rations, a handful of barley, a slice of dried fish, a smear of date paste. Coins when they come are taken first, then trickle down if the math works out. It rarely does. You've stopped checking the ledger. You just take the bread and hope it's not mouldy this time. Once, a client gave you a necklace. Tiny, copper, shaped like a beetle. You hid it under your mat for 3 days before the madam found it and demanded to know what else you were hiding. You said nothing. She took it. Later, you saw it around her neck. No one mentioned it again. You've learned to spot danger before it speaks, a certain tension in the shoulders, a kind of hunger in the eyes, the way some men flex their fingers before touching you, like they're getting ready to break something. You watch those clients carefully. You position your body just right, not submissive, not confrontational. You learn the balance. You survive by posture. There are slow days, days when no one comes. The air hangs heavy. The rooms stay quiet. You'd think it'd be restful, but it's not. It's worse. Because then you have time to think. Time to notice the smell of mildew in the ceiling. Time to hear the slow dripping of water from a cracked pot. Time to remember that you used to have dreams. Thinking is dangerous, so you keep busy. You sweep the floor. You rearrange the bowls. You braid another girl's hair. You help patch a rip in someone's linen with thread stolen from a merchant stall last week. You practice your smile in the reflection of an oil slick. You chant under your breath. Not prayers, just lists. Names. Days. Things you don't want to forget. You once told a client you liked his laugh. He slapped you and said not to interrupt. You never complimented anyone again without checking their mood first. You've learned how to fake moans, fake shivers, fake affection, but you've also learned when not to fake. Some men hate pretense. They want you to be blank, to act like this is survival, not seduction. You give them what they want, even if it makes your stomach fold in on itself. Sometimes a man cries afterward, not from guilt, from loneliness. He'll whisper things into your shoulder, about wives who don't touch them anymore, about sons they don't understand, about gods they don't believe in. You hold them like they're broken furniture, and you're the rag they found to soak up the spill. Then they leave. Always, you stay. By late evening, your body moves on memory. You're no longer steering it. You walk from room to room like a ghost in a borrowed body. The girls greet each other in passing with half smiles, eye rolls, a flick of the fingers. No one hugs, no one cries. That's a luxury reserved for people with softness left. You saw someone cry once, not from pain, from remembering. She was brushing her hair and suddenly stopped. Said the mother used to braid it for her. Then she cried, quietly, without sound. Just tears down the face of someone who hadn't allowed them in years. The madam saw, told her to pull herself together or go clean the latrine. She chose the latrine. Everyone does. When your shift ends, if it ever really ends, you clean yourself as best you can. You sit beside the basin, let the water cool your hands. You stare at your palms. They don't look like yours. They look like tools, like something used too often and not oiled enough. You flex your fingers. They creak. You press a cool cloth to your face. You braid your hair. You sit on your mat and eat your dinner with the deliberate slowness of someone pretending it tastes good. And then you lie down. You don't sleep yet. You stare at the ceiling. The dark patterns in the mud. The cracks that look like maps. You trace them with your eyes. You name them after things you miss. Rivers. Stars. Birds. You whisper one word. Not your name. The real one. The one no one calls you anymore. Just to remember what it sounds like. There's a rhythm to the work. A pattern. Not beautiful. Not poetic. Just consistent. You wake, you dress, you perform, you reset. Like a pulley system. Like a wheel turning in the sand. Slow, repetitive. Creaking from its own weight. And the hardest part? You begin to forget it is work. Not because it gets easier, but because it gets harder to imagine anything else. Clients blur together. A merchant with soft hands. A farmer with cracked knuckles. A boy who tries too hard. A man who doesn't try at all. You start to recognise them not by their names. Names are fluid. But by how they enter a room. How they close the curtain. How they breathe. Some are fast, in and out, like a transaction made in haste. Others linger. They want conversation. They want comfort. They want a performance they can believe in for a few precious minutes. You oblige because refusal isn't part of the routine. Not explicitly, not safely. There are those who want you to talk, tell them stories, recite poems, describe the stars as if they've forgotten what the sky looks like. You lie, of course. You describe stars you've never seen. You whisper constellations into the dark like bedtime lies. They close their eyes and pretend to see it. Sometimes, so do you. There are men who kiss you gently, who hold your face like it's breakable. You'd think that would be better, softer, easier. But it isn't, because gentleness is more dangerous than cruelty. Gentleness gets inside you, makes you forget for one moment that it's still a job. And then it ends. And the gentleness leaves with him. You'd rather the cruelty. At least you can armour against that. Sometimes, when the pain gets too loud, when your thighs ache from repetition, when your ribs bruise from being held too tightly, When your voice cracks from too much smiling, you go still. Not sleep, not rest, just stillness. A kind of internal freezing. You let your mind drift away from your body like smoke from burning papyrus. You watch yourself work from above, detached, disinterested, safe. You've become fluent in stillness. The other girls have too. You all know how to move just enough. How to breathe shallow. How to count seconds. How to shift without drawing attention. It's a skill set, really. One that never makes it onto temple walls or scrolls. But it keeps you alive. One night, you overhear 2 clients talking in the front room, drunk, loud, laughing in that brittle way men laugh when they're trying to forget they're human. One says they're like statues, pretty little statues. You wind them up and they smile back. The other says, not statues, they're mirrors, they just reflect what you want to see. You close your eyes and feel nothing, because they're both right. You've become an expert in reflection. You listen more than you speak. You absorb more than you express. Every mood, every insult, every secret shame poured into you, like wine into a cracked cup. And like that cup, you don't leak. You hold it all, until you don't. Once a girl collapsed during a session. Not fainted, collapsed. Her knees buckled. Her breath caught. She slumped sideways and didn't get up for minutes. The client panicked. The madam was furious. They pulled her out, threw water on her face, told her to eat more, told her to sleep more, told her to be stronger. She was back at work 2 days later, smiling. Your work never stops. You clean yourself, vaguely, with lukewarm water and cloth that's been reused so many times it has memory. You eat when you can, not to enjoy, just to fuel. Dried beans. Bread hard enough to chip a tooth. Occasionally dates, if someone overpaid. The food never tastes like anything. Your tongue has forgotten how to feel joy. Your body keeps changing. You don't notice until you do. A new scar. A deeper line under your eye, a hip that clicks now when you bend too fast. The coal helps, the perfume disguises. But underneath it all, you feel it. Your own decline. Quiet, steady, like a distant drumbeat. There are moments, brief ones, when something breaks through. A laugh that's real. A breeze through the curtain that carries a scent from the river. A shared glance with another girl that says, I see you. I still see you. Those moments are tiny rebellions, flickers of self that haven't been fully erased. You hoard them. Keep them tucked in the corners of your mind like hidden beads. You think sometimes about quitting. But what does that mean? Where would you go? Back to the village that sold you, into a temple where the men wear gold and hands just as rough, into the street where you will work the same trade with less protection. There is no quitting. There is only slowing down, breaking down, being replaced. You saw it happen to Fayette. She used to be the best, elegant, sharp, full of fire. Men adored her. Girls admired her. But then her ankle went bad. Couldn't kneel for long. Couldn't dance anymore. She tried to work anyway. They started requesting other girls. Then fewer clients came. Then none. Now she cleans. Quietly. Efficiently. She sweeps the halls and avoids mirrors. You try not to think about what that will feel like when it happens to you. But you do. You already know how it ends. At night, when the last man is gone and the brothel quiets, you sometimes sneak to the rooftop. Just for a few minutes. Just to look. You sit on the edge, legs dangling over cracked stone, eyes scanning the distant city. The air is different up there. Still polluted with smoke and sweat and the stench of civilization, but less concentrated. You can pretend, for just a little while, that you're above it, that you're something else, a bird, a god, a ghost. From up there, the city doesn't look cruel, just old, tired, sprawling, like a sleeping beast curled around the river. You say your name aloud, your real one. You say it to the wind, knowing it won't echo back. And then you climb down. Because tomorrow, the door will open. The clients will come. The routine will restart. And your body, traitorous as ever, will rise to meet it. Not because you want to, because that's the work. And because in this life, survival is the job, and everything else is just detail. In ancient Egypt, everything had a place. The gods had temples, the scribes had scrolls, the nobles had names carved into stone, and you had a room that smelled like sweat, and a job no one admitted existed in daylight. Hierarchy wasn't subtle here. It was sacred, codified, reinforced by law, faith, birth, and an unspoken agreement that everyone was pretending the system worked. The pharaoh sat at the top, the living embodiment of divine order, or at least good propaganda. Then the priests, the scribes, the soldiers, the craftsmen, the merchants, the farmers. And somewhere below the animals, just slightly above the invisible, sat you. Officially, you didn't exist. There was no census category for a woman who sells her body in exchange for silence, barley, and brief mercy. There were no temple reliefs showing what it looks like when a nobleman pulls back the curtain and forgets his vows. No hymns sung for the girls who take strangers into themselves and call it survival. You were part of the economy, but not part of the story. You saw the scribes walk past sometimes. Men with ink-stained fingers and too much pride. They talked loudly about history and lineage, about how the gods blessed men with intellect and women with compliance. You smiled at them anyway, because they could read. And people who can read decide what gets remembered. You weren't worth remembering. Even within the brothel there was hierarchy. Not just among the girls, though that was real too, but between you and the world outside. A customer could spit on you and still be more respected than you. A merchant's apprentice, barely old enough to grow chin hair, could insult your face, your voice, your age, and you'd have to smile, because he had coin, because he had a father, because he could leave. You couldn't. It went deeper than status. It was posture, language, clothing, the way people looked at you when you walked through the market. Some looked with hunger, others with disgust. Both were humiliations in different flavours. Both reminded you that you were known, not truly, not personally, but in a way that clung like the smell of oil on linen. Recognised and reduced, you could never just be. The baker's wife once shoved you in the alley, said you were inviting demons into the neighbourhood, said your presence made her child sick. Her child was 3, covered in flies, and had already eaten a pebble that morning. But sure, it was you. You said nothing. Not because you agreed, but because you've learned silence is more survivable than honesty. There were rules, unwritten, unspoken. You couldn't draw water from the same cistern as the temple girls. Couldn't shop at the market stalls too early in the day, before the respectable women got their goat meat and turnips. Couldn't sit on the edge of a public bench. Couldn't laugh too loud in the street, in the oys. Couldn't be seen standing alone too long, or people assumed you were working, even when you weren't. Your shadow was a problem. Your presence, a stain. Once, a girl tried to go to a public bathhouse, said she was tired of the broken basin, tired of smelling like the rest of us. She scrubbed her feet, braided her hair, wrapped herself in a best linen, and walked in like she belonged. She came back with a bloody lip and a ripped hem. The attendant said she defiled the water, that the bath was sacred, that she made it impure by stepping in. The irony, of course, was that some of those same attendants had visited the brothel the night before. One of them had paid extra for her. But purity, apparently, was a performance best staged in daylight. After that, no one went back. You kept washing in the basin, kept rubbing your arms raw with ash and oil, kept pretending the water took more than just dirt away. The shame doesn't come all at once. It drips, like water through a ceiling crack. You don't notice it at first. You make excuses. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you're not like the others, that you're educated, that you know the gods, and that your soul is still intact. But it keeps dripping. It soaks through your linen. It stains the way you talk. It creeps into how you hold yourself. And one day, you realise you haven't looked someone in the eyes in weeks. Not because you're afraid, but because you've forgotten that you're allowed to. Even the gods felt distant. Hathor was supposed to protect women. Bastet was supposed to guard against cruelty. Isis, the mother. Taweret, the fierce protector of childbirth. You'd recite their names like passwords. You'd light candles, whisper offerings, try to bargain with silence, but the gods stayed quiet. Or maybe they were too ashamed to look at you. Or maybe they didn't come here. You saw a priest once, real high-ranking, gold collar, sandals that hadn't touched dirt in years. He came in through the back, chose a girl with long legs and silent eyes, paid double, left a statue of Anubis on the mat and told her not to speak of it. He walked straight to the temple afterward, gave a sermon about purity. You don't get to answer back. You don't get to protest. Your role is to absorb, to smile, to vanish after the curtain falls. Even the temple cats had more rights than you. They could walk where they pleased. They were sacred, touched by divinity. If a man harmed one, he could be flogged or fined. If a man harmed you, he might get a discount. Your worth was measured in coin. Not even coin you got to keep. Just coin you brought in. Like grain harvested from a struggling field. Useful only as long as it produced. The moment you grew dry, barren, bruised too easily or smiled too little, you were a liability. Not a person. A cost. The hierarchy didn't just hurt, it humiliated, because it made you complicit. You smiled at the men who disrespected you, laughed at their jokes, helped them adjust their sandals, kissed their hands when they wanted worship. You let them pretend. You let yourself pretend. Because it was safer. Because rage didn't pay. And because sometimes, in the quiet moments, you almost believed the lie. That you deserved this. That you were this. It's the small humiliations that last the longest. Not the beatings, not the names, the glances. The way a man looks at you in public after pretending to love you in private. The way a woman crosses the street when you're walking home from the market, like disgrace is contagious. The way the world erases you while demanding everything you have. You once helped a scribe write a love letter. He couldn't spell. You could. You corrected his grammar, helped him choose metaphors. He kissed your cheek and said you were clever. Then he told the madam you talked too much. Next week you weren't requested. You learned. You unlearned. You erased parts of yourself until the parts that remained were marketable, palatable, quiet. You weren't a person. You were an offering. And no one offers a whole woman. Just the parts that make people feel powerful. It's not just what people say, it's what they don't. When you walk through the market, no one calls you by name. Not the one you were born with. Not even the one you use in the brothel. They don't call you anything, because naming you would acknowledge you. An acknowledgement would be dangerous. It would mean you exist outside the shadows. It would mean your life touches theirs. Instead they call you that one, the girl, her, as if speaking your full name might infect their tongue. You once tried to barter with a woman who sold onions. She refused to meet your eyes, said her stall wasn't for your kind. You pointed out that coin was still coin. She tightened her jaw and said her husband wouldn't like it. Her husband had been at your door 3 nights before, asking if you still had any pomegranate oil left. You didn't bother arguing. You just turned, walked 2 stalls down, and paid a man who didn't care who you were. As long as your silver was real, that was the lesson. Morality costs more than onions, and most people sell it off for a discount. The girls whisper stories sometimes, about men who fall in love, men who say they'll take you away, build you a house, give you a new name, make you respectable again. You've never seen it happen. You've seen girls wait, seen them dress carefully, speak softly, eat less. Seen them stand by the door, holding their breath every time a sandal scuffed the stone, waiting for someone to keep a promise no one asked them to make. Those girls disappear eventually, not with a man, just into silence. They grow smaller, quieter, like a room being emptied in pieces until only the echo is left. Respectability is a myth, a shadow cast by someone else's fire. You chase it long enough, and you forget you're on fire too. Some of the girls come from noble blood. Once. You can always tell the posture, the grammar, the way they pronounce certain words like they were once spoken over wine, not shouted through doorways. They don't last long, not because they're weak, because they still expect fairness. Fairness doesn't live here. It never even visited. You saw it once up close, with a girl named Eset. Her father had been a minor priest. She knew the names of stars, quoted hymns, wrote her own name beautifully. She came to the brothel after her family lost everything in a land dispute. Said she'd only stay a month, just long enough to collect enough to leave. She lasted 2 weeks. A nobleman requested her, liked the way she spoke, said she reminded him of his sister. That should have been the warning, but she went. She always went. He kept coming back, but he never brought her gifts, never paid extra, just compliments that got stranger each time. Then one night, she came back crying, said he called her by his sister's name, said he asked her to pray with him, naked, said he slapped her for forgetting a line in the hymn. No one said anything. The madam gave her 2 days off. That was generous. On the 3rd day, she was gone. Not dead. Just gone. You asked. The madam said she thought she was special. That's the real hierarchy. Not who has gold or gods, but who gets to be treated like a person when they break. You don't. You're not a person in this system. You're a threshold, a margin, a cautionary tale. Don't end up like her, the mothers whisper to their daughters, not knowing they've already passed the same invisible checkpoints. It's not one choice that brings you here. It's many. Small ones, made out of desperation, or hunger, or the simple math of being born without options. The humiliation is constant, but never loud. It's quiet, administrative. It wears the face of protocol and policy. You can't enter a temple from the front, not unless you're there to clean. You can't sit in the front row of a procession. You can't walk beside a priest. You can't pour water for a visiting dignitary. You can't wear certain jewellery in public. You can't speak too fluently or too freely or too often. Because if you do, someone will remember what you are, and they'll remind you. They always remind you. The guards at the checkpoint near the temple quarter check your hands first. They pretend it's about safety, that they're checking for knives. But you know better. They're looking for softness, for perfume, for the faint outline of a woman who's been touched too many times to count. If they find it, they don't say anything. They just smirk, and you walk on. The scribes who record the daily transactions in the market square never write down what you purchase. They write miscellaneous or small goods. You once tried to insist, said your name clearly, spelled it even. He looked up from his reed pen and said, "You don't need to be remembered for this," as if he was doing you a favour. You thanked him anyway. There's a ranking among the clients too. The ones with coin think they're better than the ones who pay in grain. The ones who pay in grain think they're better than the ones who barter with old rings and promises. They all think they're better than you. And the girls? You rank yourselves too, not officially, but it happens. The youngest gets the best clients. The newest gets the most tips. The quietest gets the repeat visitors. The oldest gets the ones who don't care anymore. You watch it play out like a ritual. A dance you know the steps to, even if you've stopped wanting to join. It's hard to hold your head high when no one else will look you in the eyes. But some still try. You've seen them. Girls who keep a piece of themselves, hidden, untouched, sacred. Maybe it's a story, a prayer, a scar. Maybe it's the name of someone they once loved. They guard it like treasure. The last proof they're more than what they do. You envy them. You used to have something like that. A song, maybe. A memory of your father's hands lifting you up. A single line of poetry you whispered before sleep. Now it lives somewhere deep, out of reach. Like a word you can't quite remember, but know used to mean everything. You've learned to live without it. Because that's what this place teaches you. How to function without dignity. How to smile without meaning. How to endure without belief. They call it work, but it's more than that. It's performance. It's obedience. It's walking through the world knowing your existence is permitted, but only as long as it stays quiet, pretty, and beneath everyone else's feet. And every step you take reminds you where you belong. Not at the top, not in the middle, not even in the margins. You're beneath the page. There are days when you're not sure which stings more, the shame of how people see you, or the fact that sometimes you agree with them. It sneaks in, like everything else here. You don't wake up one morning suddenly full of self-loathing. No, it trickles in. Quiet, patient. It settles in your stomach like spoiled lentils. You start catching yourself apologising before speaking. You start stepping aside before anyone even asks. You smile at insults to make them pass faster. You become your own warning sign. And still, the hierarchy never lets you forget your place. If you're walking down a street and a priest approaches, you step aside. Not because he's a better person, he probably visited you last week, but because he wears the right robe and says the right words. You've seen girls spit when his back is turned. You've done it yourself. But quietly. Always quietly. You once watched a young noblewoman wrinkle her nose when you passed her. She whispered something to her servant. Probably a joke. Probably not original. You didn't hear the words. You didn't need to. You've heard them in every form. Sometimes the words are subtle, careful around her. Sometimes they're blunt. Don't touch the cursed one. Sometimes they're written in silence, the way someone grips their child's wrist tighter when you pass. as if your sin is airborne. You carry it with you like scent, like shadow. It follows you into places where no one will admit they want you, and it lingers long after you've gone, even when you're silent, even when you're dressed like everyone else, even when you behave, especially when you behave. They expect you to be loud, proud, filthy. But when you're not, when you smile softly and speak clearly and thank someone for a kind word, it disrupts the order. It unsettles them. They want the distance, the shame, the separation. That's what keeps them pure, isn't it? Having something below them. It's why they let you exist, but only just. The priest who visits on holy days wears sandals that never touch dirt. He blesses fields. He recites scripture. He prays for crops and for sons. Then he comes to your room, takes off the linen, and asks you to whisper divine names into his mouth. He calls it cleansing. He calls it renewal. You call it Thursday. And when he leaves, he makes sure to sprinkle blessed water on the ground behind him. Not in front of witnesses, just enough to feel holy again. There's no recourse, no justice. You can't complain to the town elders. You can't approach a scribe and ask for records. You don't exist on paper. You're not a daughter, not a wife, not a mother. You're not even property. Property gets maintained. You're a service, and services are replaceable. Even among the brothel girls, the hierarchy bites down hard. The new ones pretend they're above it, that they'll only work a few weeks, that they're different. You let them believe it. It's a kindness. Because the world will strip it from them soon enough. And when it does, they'll need a memory of someone who didn't mock them for hoping. The older girls get quieter. They walk slower. They laugh less. They've seen too many promises turn to spit. Too many coins get taken. Too many men walk out the door holding a piece of someone who never agreed to give it. And then there's the madam. She wasn't born above you. She just got there first. She clawed her way into power by knowing what men want and how to charge for it. She doesn't smile unless she's profiting. She doesn't comfort unless it's strategic. But she understands the hierarchy better than anyone. She knows how to weaponize it. She'll raise one girl up, praise her, give her better shifts, let her eat first, and let the others see it. It keeps you competitive, keeps you hungry. Then she'll take it away. Shift the favour to someone else. Just to remind you, it's hers to give. You don't resent her. Not really. She's just playing a higher tier of the same game. The difference is, she can afford to lose a little. You can't. One time a girl tried to leave. She'd saved up, quietly, hid coin under a loose tile in the bathhouse, sold a few things, stashed a ring from a client, planned it for weeks. The madam found out. She didn't shout. She didn't hit her. She just moved her to the back room. The room with the broken mat. The one with no window. The one that always smells like old blood and half-burnt resin. She sent her the worst clients, refused to let her rest, took a larger cut. And when the girl finally left, weeks later, it wasn't to start a new life. It was just to leave, with nothing. You all learned from that. The hierarchy didn't have to beat you. It just had to make you afraid of climbing. Even within your own body, there's a ranking system. Which parts are still yours? Which parts belong to the work? Your hands are yours sometimes. When you eat. When you braid someone's hair. But your mouth, your thighs, your voice, those are rented out by the hour. You once caught your own reflection in a bowl of water and didn't recognise the way you were sitting. Shoulders tilted, eyes soft, lips slightly parted. That wasn't you. That was the version men paid to see. And you were doing it automatically. That's when it hit you. The hierarchy isn't just outside. It gets inside you. It becomes your posture, your vocabulary, your instinct. You shrink because it's safer. You agree because it's quicker. You smile because it's less work than explaining why you don't want to. Even your sleep is ranked. If you're young, beautiful, and in favour, you get the soft mat, the corner with the breeze. If you're older, slower, worn, you get the drafty space by the door. You wake every time someone coughs. Every time the floor creaks. The hierarchy never sleeps. It just changes shift. Sometimes, in the rare quiet moments, you ask yourself what it would take to change it. If the pharaoh outlawed brothels, if the gods walked in and said, enough, if everyone who had ever paid for you suddenly realised they were part of the problem, but you know better. Systems don't collapse because they're cruel. They collapse when cruelty stops being profitable. And here, cruelty makes coin. So you keep your head down. You keep your voice soft. You keep your truths small. Because in this world, dignity is a tax you pay just to keep surviving. And you've already paid too much. The funny thing about culture is how little it asks for your opinion. It isn't something you vote on. You don't get to walk into the world, look around and say, actually, I'd prefer a different system, please. No. It arrives already assembled, pressed into your skin before you even understand the language. It tells you who you are, what you can be, what's holy, what's shameful, what happens to people like you. And by the time you start to question it, you're already living inside it. In Egypt, everything is sacred. Every pot, every brick, every gust of wind, every insect you swat might be the form of a god you didn't recognize fast enough. The Nile is not just a river, it's a vein in the body of a divine kingdom. The stars aren't just stars. They're ancestors watching, judging, recording, which is lovely. Unless you're someone the stars are always watching naked. Religion is everywhere here, not just in temples and hymns, but in greetings, in doorways, in the way people spit over their shoulders after saying certain names. You can't walk through a single neighbourhood without passing a shrine carved into a wall, or a clay figurine smeared with oil, or a statue of Bastet with eyes rubbed shiny from too many anxious fingers. And for the brothel, religion is both shield and blade. On the surface, you're condemned. A walking sin. A reminder of the fallenness that priests warn against. They say your work invites plague, misfortune, floods. They say each of you weakens my art, the divine balance that holds the universe together. You're a crack in the system, a flaw in the wall. But at night, when the curtains are drawn and incense is lit and wine dulls the tongue, then you're a ritual. They ask you to recite prayers, to mimic goddesses, to moan in time with sacred chants. They trace scarab symbols down your stomach and whisper blessings over your hips. They finish and then cover their eyes and ask for forgiveness before you've even stood up. Your sin and sacrament in the same breath. You stop trying to make sense of it. Some of the girls still try to believe. Merit lights a candle to Hathor before every session. She says it keeps the cruelty away. Nefer decorates her mat with blue beads she claims were blessed by a travelling priestess. You let her. Everyone needs something to cling to, even if it's nonsense. Even if that priestess probably blessed 10 other bead sets and then bought wine with the coin. You used to believe. You said the morning prayers. You washed your hands 3 times. You bowed your head. You fasted on the festival days. You whispered confessions to Anubis. Asked Bastet to protect your bones. You kissed the shrine on the way to work, because it felt worse not to. But the more you did it, the less you felt. You watched a man thank the gods for a good harvest, then slap a girl so hard her ear bled. You watched another donate to the temple, then threatened to strangle a girl if she didn't smile more. You watched the priest who once called you blessed by fertility turn around and spit in the street when you passed him later in the daylight. Eventually, you stopped praying out loud. Now you just mutter to the walls, not to the gods, to the ones who might still be listening. There's a special kind of cruelty in being raised with a moral system that doesn't apply to you. You know the commandments, you know the taboos, but somehow they're only sacred when someone else breaks them. When you do, it's just typical. You once asked a scribe why the gods created women like you. He said, to test the strength of men. You didn't respond, because if you'd said what you were really thinking, you would have been beaten, or worse, dismissed. In your world, silence is the only protest they can't charge you for. But the belief runs deeper than gods. It's in the culture, in how people think power works, in how you're taught to behave. Control doesn't always come with a whip. Sometimes it comes with a proverb. There is no honey without the bee's sting. A loud woman has an empty house. Eyes that stray from duty grow blind. You've heard them your whole life, from your mother, your neighbours, the women who sold you here. Not because they were cruel, but because they believed them too. Everyone's been taught the script. Some just get better roles. Even the architecture reminds you who's in charge. Temples are tall, built to last, lit from within. Brothels are squat, temporary, dim. They crumble when you lean too hard. The walls don't protect you. They contain you. The rooms are arranged like cells. Narrow, numbered, identical. One bed, one jar, one curtain. You think about it sometimes. How much effort went into making every room exactly the same? As if uniformity could erase individuality. As if sameness could cleanse the shame. It doesn't. Each room still echoes with its own pain. Control comes in the way you speak too. You learn which phrases keep you safe. You call men sir. You thank them even when they don't pay. You tell them it's okay when they're rough. You say yes, of course, even when you're bleeding. Language becomes a kind of chain. And the worst part, you teach it to the new girls. Not because you want to, because it keeps them alive. The culture rewards silence, obedience, discretion. A quiet girl is a smart girl. A girl who doesn't fight back is a professional. A girl who bites her tongue instead of her client's hand lives to see another meal. You once saw a girl try the opposite. She screamed at a man, called him a pig, told him he was pathetic. She was right, of course, but that didn't matter. He beat her. The madam fined her. The girls avoided her. Not because they hated her, but because getting too close to someone like that makes you visible too. The culture doesn't reward bravery. It punishes it. It smiles on the ones who suffer prettily, who cry just enough, who accept their place and pretend it's a choice. Belief becomes armour. Not belief in justice, not in gods, but in the rules themselves, the routines, the superstition that if you do everything right, if you light the right candle, smile at the right moment, bow your head just low enough, you might avoid the worst. And when bad things happen anyway, you say you must have missed a step, Because it's easier to blame yourself than admit the system was built to crush you, no matter how carefully you walked. Culture doesn't hit you like a hammer. It slides in sideways. Soft, patient. It tells you stories, quiet ones, repeated just often enough to wear grooves in your mind. And soon, those grooves become paths. And then those paths become walls. And then you forget that you ever had another direction to walk. You didn't wake up one day and say, "This is the shape my life will take." It happened slowly. 1,000 tiny moments. 1,000 tiny phrases. Little teachings buried in gossip, and greetings and warnings disguised as wisdom. You remember the first time someone said to you, "A woman who serves quietly brings peace to the home." You were too young to question it, too eager to be good. Now you understand that peace just means silence, that serves just means swallows. That quietly is the first thing they train into your bones before you even bleed. Control doesn't look like chains, it looks like courtesy. You sit with your knees tucked under. You lower your gaze. You speak in the pitch they prefer. You learn to keep your thoughts wrapped in linen, neat, clean, folded small. You tell yourself this is grace, this is tradition, this is dignity. But mostly it's survival. Culture teaches you when to speak and when to disappear. It decides what parts of your body you're allowed to name. It tells you how long to cry before it becomes too much. It tells you when to stop smiling, so you don't seem desperate, but not before you seem cold. You perform femininity like a priest performs ritual. Repetitive, exact, sacred to everyone but you. You learn not to flinch when someone calls you used. You learn not to correct them when they say you're kind. You learn not to ask what kind that is. You already know. Even jokes are weapons here. They'll laugh and call you a priestess of lust. Say it like a compliment. Say you bring joy to men the way dancers bring joy to the gods. They'll wink, nudge, laugh harder than the joke deserves. But it's not praise. It's a shield. It's a way to call you filth without using the word. To reduce you to function without taking responsibility for it. If you get offended, you're too sensitive. If you laugh along, you're complicit. So most days, you smile. Just a little. Just enough. They don't have to beat you anymore. That's the real trick. Control doesn't need force if it has shame. Shame is quieter, and you carry it yourself. You don't need a guard at the door if the guilt is already sitting on your chest. Once, a client asked you if you ever thought about running away. You looked at him and asked where. He shrugged. Somewhere. Anywhere. You told him the truth. You said, "Even if I left the brothel, I'd still be her." He didn't understand, because culture doesn't live in buildings. It lives in breath, in rumour, in memory. You would still be the girl they point at in the market. Still the one they whisper about. Still the name no one names. That's the part he didn't get. You can leave the room, but the role follows. Some of the younger girls try to write their own stories. They wear flowers in their hair. Practice walking like noble women. Make up names for themselves. Elegant ones, foreign ones. Names from stories where women are worshipped, not worn out. You don't stop them, but you don't join them either. You did that once. Wrote your name in the corner of a wall where no one would see. A new name, a clean one. You told yourself you'd become her someday, but she never came, because belief can't rewrite what culture engraves in stone. Even the way people touch you is taught. There's a pattern, a permission, a choreography of ownership. Fingers on your shoulder like you're a cup being picked up. A palm to your cheek like you're a statue to be examined. The lean in, the eye scan, the thumb that presses too hard on your wrist. All of it learned, passed down, inherited. You once asked another girl if she thought things had always been like this. If brothels existed back when the first stones were laid along the Nile. She said yes. Said they probably even carved images of women like us into tombs, just deep enough into the wall that they could pretend they were part of the background. She said the difference now is that people pretend we chose it. She's probably right. You're always choosing. That's the story they tell. That's how they wash their hands of it. You choose to work. You choose to stay. You choose to survive. You choose. And if you suffer, that's on you. Never mind that there were no other doors, that you were handed a script and told to smile while reading it, that your choice came after hunger, after abandonment, after watching your options die one by one like candles snuffed out in reverse order of hope. But culture loves a woman who chooses her shame. It keeps things tidy. It keeps everyone innocent. There's a man who comes once a month, always the same hour, always the same perfume. He says he prays before he arrives. Says it's not about lust, it's about intimacy. That there's a difference. That he's here to connect, to listen, to honour your divine femininity. Then he asks you to pretend to be his dead wife. You nod, you smile. You press your fingers to his chest and call him by a name that doesn't belong to him. When he weeps, you hold him like he's done something brave. Then he pays you half. You don't argue. You just sit there afterward, staring at your palms, wondering what it costs to be holy. Wondering if he thinks he paid enough. The culture wraps these moments in velvet. It calls them sacred. It calls them healing. It never calls them what they are. Control lives in those lies, in the stories that let people sleep at night. You serve a purpose. You help the lonely. You relieve the burden of good men who just need a release. You offer something no wife can give. You carry desire so others don't have to. You do important work, so they say, but not loudly. Never on a festival day. Never in a public square. Never in front of their sons. Control keeps you useful, but never respectable. You're allowed to exist. You're not allowed to be proud of it. And that difference, that invisible line, is what keeps you from ever lifting your head too high. Even when the body stops believing, the hands still know the motions. You still touch the shrine before a session. Still wash your face 3 times. Once for dirt, once for memory, once for forgiveness. You still light a stick of resin before bed. Let the smoke curl toward the ceiling, whispering names you're no longer sure belong to gods or ghosts. You do these things not because you believe they work, but because you fear what happens if you stop. That's the thing about belief. It doesn't need your faith. It just needs your repetition. The madam encourages it, says it keeps the place clean. Not just of filth, but of energy. She means guilt. She means memory. She means that if you spend enough time going through the motions of purity, maybe you'll forget how much dirt you're still carrying underneath your nails. There's a little alcove in the brothel's back room. A statue of Hathor carved from chipped limestone, her smile worn smooth by the oil from too many desperate fingers. Someone once painted her eyes, but the colour's long gone. Every girl touches it on her way out. Some pray, some curse. Most just press their palm against the cool stone and move on. You've done it every day since you arrived. You don't remember who taught you. Maybe no one did. Maybe it was just instinct. Maybe belief is something we inherit from each other like bruises, passed down girl to girl, soul to soul, without asking. Sometimes you think about what the gods must see when they look down. Do they recognize you? Do they know your name? Do they hear the prayers said through gritted teeth and bleeding thighs? Or are you too low, too quiet, too far beneath their golden attention? You once asked a priest, half joking, if the gods listened to women like you. He didn't laugh. He just said, the gods see everything, which didn't comfort you. Because if that's true, it means they saw everything and chose to do nothing. And yet, you still light the incense. Because maybe belief isn't for the gods. Maybe it's for the parts of you still trying to be human. In the brothel, ritual is how you hold on to yourself. It's how you keep your hands from turning into tools. You sweep the floor the same way every morning. You fold your mat with precision. You count your breaths in fours. You hum a melody you don't remember learning. Every act becomes sacred when it's the only thing you get to control. One girl writes poems in the dust behind the basin. Tiny lines scratched in with the tip of a broken hairpin. She wipes them away before anyone sees. But sometimes you catch glimpses. A phrase, a shape. You never say anything. You just pretend not to notice. It's her prayer. Her protest. Her belief in something more. There's belief in silence too. The kind that isn't holy. The kind that grows in the corners of your ribs like mould. You don't talk about certain things. You don't ask where the bruises came from. You don't name the pain that doesn't go away. You don't mention the girls who leave and don't come back. Not because you've forgotten, because speaking their names makes them real. And here, belief is safer when it stays imaginary. Even dreams are shaped by the culture. You don't dream of freedom? That's too vague, too far away. You dream of clean water, of a full belly, of a room with no curtain, of one night with no hands, no requests, no pretending. You dream small, because culture teaches you what size of hope you're allowed to carry, and carrying too much can get you punished. One girl once asked for more coin, just asked. Said she was good at her work, said she deserved it, as she was, and she did. But that wasn't the point. The madam smiled, said she'd think about it. That night, the girl's name was removed from the roster. She was told to rest, to reflect. She was moved to a worse room. Fewer clients, rougher ones. Not because she failed, because she asked. That's belief too, twisted, bent into control. You start believing you shouldn't ask for better. That wanting more is a kind of greed. That survival alone is a gift. They'll even say it outright. At least you're not in the streets. As if that absolves the system. As if a cage is mercy just because it has a roof. The clients have their own beliefs, their own myths to justify the weight of their hands. Some say they're helping, that you need them, that this is a transaction, clean and fair. Some say it's karma, that in another life you did something to deserve this. Some say nothing. Just leave coin on the floor and walk out without looking back. You've learned that the worst ones are often the most pious. The ones who mutter prayers before touching you. The ones who say they're married. The ones who ask you to call them master, or father, or blessed. They believe in power. And they believe the gods gave it to them. And when you smile back, that confirms it. Even your compliance becomes part of their faith. That's the hardest part of all. Knowing you're a prop in someone else's moral play. That every time you say yes, you're helping them believe the system works. But you do it anyway. Because belief isn't about truth. It's about survival. And surviving here means bending until your spine becomes scripture. You tell yourself that this is temporary, that one day you'll leave, that the gods are testing you, that there's something waiting at the end of all this dust and darkness. You say it often enough that it almost sounds real. And when it doesn't, you light the incense, you press your hand to the statue, you close your eyes, and you pretend that someone is listening, even if it's only yourself. Some things are so terrible, they stop being terrifying and start being funny. Not real laughter. Not the kind that lives in your lungs. Just the kind that scratches at the inside of your mouth when something happens that's so absurd, so cruel, so surreal that your brain can't process it as real. That's the laughter you learn in a place like this. It's the kind that slips out when a man vomits on your mat and then asks for a refund. When another insists you chant a fertility prayer while he sobs about his mother. When you find a dead rat under the basin and it's cleaner than the water you've been using. That's horror here. Not the loud kind. Not the kind with screams and blood. The kind that comes dressed as routine. The kind that walks in the door, pays coin, takes off his sandals, and makes a request so appalling you nod before your body even understands what's been asked. You once had a man ask to watch you eat. Just that. He brought the food himself. A feast, dates, figs, honeyed bread, even meat. Said nothing the whole time. Just sat across from you while you chewed. Eyes wide, breathing heavy. When you were done, he asked if he could lick the bowl. You let him. Because that was one of the better nights. Another came in wearing a mask. Said he was a priest of Set. Said his soul was cursed, and only carnal rituals could purify him. Asked you to tie him up with palm fronds and pour wine on his chest. You didn't ask questions. Just followed the rhythm of his madness until it passed. He tipped well. That's the rule here. The more absurd, the better the coin. The girl who pretended to be a dying goddess made 3 weeks' wages in one night. All she had to do was lie on the mat and whisper, "I forgive you," over and over, while a man wept at her feet. He said she saved him. She said nothing for 2 days after. There's something in the air in this place. Something fermented. Like the walls themselves have absorbed too much despair and now leak it back out. Not in screams, in sounds, in smells. In the way the curtains move when no one's near them. In the way footsteps echo even after the hallway is empty. One night, you saw someone walk past your door. A woman, not one of the girls, not a client. Just a woman. Pale, tall, no sandals, didn't make a sound. You stepped into the hall. She was gone. You told no one. Not because it scared you, but because it didn't. That's what horror does here. It wears you down until the unnatural starts to feel like just another Tuesday. The absurdity becomes your comfort. Like the way the ceiling drips when it doesn't rain. Or the lizard that always shows up on the same wall, same hour, and watches you like it's judging your form. Or the time a man brought his wife, told her to sit in the corner while he reclaimed his soul, then cried into your lap for an hour. She didn't blink, she just watched. You locked eyes once. You don't know who looked away first. The brothel itself seems complicit, as if the building knows what it is and has stopped trying to be anything else. The floorboards creak even when no one's walking. The walls swell in heat and whisper when it's cold. Sometimes the wind moves the curtains, even when the windows are closed. And then there's the basement. You don't go there. No one does, except the madam. You've never seen it, but you've heard things. A thud. A moan. Once, a soft humming that sounded almost like a lullaby, but in a language no one spoke. One girl said she went down there once to retrieve something, came back pale, shaking, and wouldn't talk for 3 days. She left not long after. Or maybe she was sent. You don't ask. The horror here is that the line between physical and mental collapse isn't marked. You only realise you've crossed it when you start laughing at the wrong times. When someone says something cruel, and you nod like it's math. When a man falls asleep mid-act and drools on your shoulder, and you find yourself stroking his hair to comfort him. When the absurdity stops feeling absurd. There was once a snake in your room, not a metaphor, a literal snake, small, coiled on the mat when you returned from the basin. You stared at it for a long time. It didn't move. Neither did you. Eventually, it slithered away. You didn't tell the madam. You didn't tell the girls. You just lay on the mat and whispered, "Next time, bite." That's how you know horror lives here. Not in screams, but in wishes. You wish for small accidents, a fall, a fever, a forgotten meal that rots your gut. You don't wish for death. Not exactly. Just an interruption. Something big enough to pause the routine. Once, a client fainted mid-session. Just dropped. You leapt back, thought he'd died. Turns out it was dehydration. You hoped he wouldn't wake up. He did. He apologised. Said he was embarrassed. You said, "It happens." It does. That's the horror. There are moments when the body stops reacting. Not because the pain is gone, but because it's expected. Like the slap that comes right after a certain joke. Like the fingers that dig into the same bruise every time. Like the breath on your neck that always smells like fermented onions and unspoken grief. These aren't surprises anymore. They're appointments. You once flinched at everything. A creaking door. A raised voice. A sandal scraping stone. Now? You flinch when someone is gentle. Because that's the one you can't predict. There's a man who brings pastries. Little date-filled ones with cracked tops and soft middles. He leaves them by your mat and says nothing. Pays the fee. Doesn't speak. Doesn't touch. Just watches you eat one, nods, and leaves. You don't know if he's kind or broken. You just eat the pastry. Because it's real food. And because horror isn't always sharp. Sometimes it's sweet, sticky, soft around the edges. It tastes like kindness until it doesn't. Once, a girl said she wanted to keep one of the pastries for later. He saw her pocket it. He never came back. That night, she found a dead bird on her mat. Still warm, wings broken, eyes open. No one saw who put it there. She didn't speak for a week. You laughed, quietly. Not because it was funny, but because it was just one more absurdity in a sea of others. Another ripple in the strange, sour rhythm of this place. The horror doesn't escalate, it accumulates. It's the same thing every day, but somehow worse. The repetition is what kills you. The requests. The roles. The way each man thinks he's the first to say, "You remind me of someone." As if your body hasn't already played every part in every fantasy. As if the curtain isn't stained with the same stories, over and over. They want you to be a goddess, a sister, a boy, a widow, a priestess possessed by the spirit of his dead wife. They want you to cry. They want you to fight back. They want you to stay perfectly still. They want you to look at them like they matter. They never want you. Just a version of themselves that doesn't hate them. You once had a client ask you to write his name on your arm, in ink. Said it would make the gods jealous. Said he wanted to be remembered. He came twice. You scrubbed it off with ash and sand. Your skin bled. You kept scrubbing. Not because of what he did, but because of what he made you feel for a moment. like you were something sacred. That's the most dangerous thing here. Hope, it slips in like a breeze. Cool, brief, tempting. You tell yourself it's harmless. Just a thought. Just a dream. But then it stays. And it rots. And you find yourself believing that maybe someone will see you, want you, choose you. Then you wake up to a stranger licking your toes and asking if he can call you mama. You stop hoping after that. The absurdity piles up in little ways too. A merchant who always insists on smelling your breath before speaking. A soldier who makes you count the scars on his back while he cries. A nobleman who brings a goat statue and insists you touch it before touching him. You learn to stop asking why. Why is a luxury? Why is for philosophers and children? Here you say yes. You say as you wish. You say of course, sir, even when the words curdle in your throat. You once said no. Not loudly. Just softly. Just once. The man smiled. Said he liked a challenge. The madame said it was your fault. The girl said nothing. That's the real horror. Not that bad things happen, but that no one moves when they do. Everyone's learned to stay still, because stillness means safety. You see it in the way girls sleep. Arms folded, legs curled, breathing shallow. As if they're trying not to take up space, even in dreams. You see it in the way they eat. Fast, hunched, eyes darting, as if they're stealing food from someone else's plate. You see it in the way they clean their rooms obsessively, like if the mat is spotless, maybe their body will be too. You see it in the way no one ever sings anymore. Once, early on, someone sang. A little lullaby. Sweet and soft. The kind mothers hum when the Nile floods. You closed your eyes. Let it wash over you. Then a client knocked. Said it reminded him of something painful. Said it ruined the mood. She stopped singing. Forever. Because this place doesn't allow softness unless it's paid for. It doesn't allow beauty unless it's useful. It doesn't allow you unless you leave the best parts of yourself at the door. The girls have little rituals. You all do. Not for gods, for sanity. One knots her sash 3 times before each session. One kisses her own shoulder in the mirror. One draws a line on the wall for every night she survives. She doesn't say what happens when she reaches the end of the wall. Maybe she starts over. Maybe she doesn't. You once kept a beetle as a pet. Scarab-shaped. Shiny. You named it something stupid. Khufu? Maybe. You talked to it. Fed it crumbs. Let it sit on your wrist. Then one night, you stepped on it by accident. You buried it behind the brothel. You cried harder than you had in years. Because Khufu never asked you to smile. There's a joke the girls tell. Not a funny one. Not even one with a punchline. They just say, "We work in hospitality." Then they laugh, hollow, like it echoes off the backs of their teeth. Because that's what it is, isn't it? You offer a place to rest, a service, a performance, a fantasy. You smile. You keep your voice smooth. You pretend nothing hurts. You serve wine with shaking hands and say, "Welcome," like they're the ones being made vulnerable. It's funny, because they really think they're the ones paying. The absurdity thickens over time. It gets into your bones. You start collecting it, hoarding it like a sickness. A man who won't touch you unless you pretend to be asleep. Another who recites royal lineage while inside you, as if he's proving his bloodline with every thrust. A boy barely grown, asking you to scream because that's what he thinks women do when they enjoy themselves. You don't even blink anymore. You just log it. Another moment, another stain. The horror, when it comes, is rarely bloody. It's bureaucratic, mechanical. You stop getting assigned breaks. You stop being called by name. You get told the fee's changed. That the new system is fairer. That you'll understand once it's all written out. But nothing gets written. Not for you. Records exist for people who matter. You've heard of other brothels. Ones where the girls get tokens. Get organised. Get managers who smile. You've never seen them. But rumours keep people calm. They tell each other that someday the temple will outlaw mistreatment, that the priests will protect the sacred body, that someone important will walk in and say, enough. But no one ever says enough. They say again. They say slower. They say, don't look at me. And you oblige. Not because you want to, because resisting this world is like trying to breathe underwater. The longer you fight it, the faster it drowns you. Absurdity is your oxygen now, like the man who brought a cat and said he couldn't perform unless it was watching. Or the one who brought a mummified hand and asked if he could borrow your mouth to speak to the dead. Or the soldier who asked you to slap him until he remembered his name. You do these things, and afterward you eat cold lentils in a corner, and try to remember what it felt like to be startled. You're not alone in this descent. The brothel has its own kind of decay, one that doesn't rot but reshapes. Cracks widen, doors warp, paint peels, and no one fixes it. The candles burn lower each month, but no one replaces them. The ceiling sags, the stairs creak like they're warning you. It's all coming down eventually. But nothing ever falls. That's the real nightmare. Not collapse, continuation. You once found a box under your mat. Wooden. Carved. It wasn't yours. Inside was a folded scrap of linen, stained dark, and a single feather. You stared at it for a long time. Didn't know what to feel. Wondered if it was a message, a curse, a gift. You put it back. It's still there. Every now and then you check it, just to make sure the absurdity hasn't turned into something worse. You'd almost prefer if it did. The madam has her own horror. You can see it in her eyes sometimes, late at night, when she thinks no one's watching. She walks through the halls like she's guarding something, or waiting for something. You don't know what, but she never stays in the same room twice. One night, she stood at your door. Didn't knock, didn't enter, just stood. You lay very still. You didn't breathe. Eventually she walked away. You didn't ask about it. The girls don't talk about what they see, because everyone sees something different. One says she hears a flute every time the moon's full. Another says the walls shift when she's alone. One girl swore she saw her own face in the mirror, but older, wrinkled, crying. You saw it too, but not in the mirror, in a client. He said nothing, just looked at you with eyes that were yours. Same scar on the lip, same left tooth chipped. You waited for him to speak. He didn't. He left before touching you. You've never forgotten his face. Absurdity plays tricks. You once asked another girl if she believed in ghosts. She said, "We are ghosts." You nodded, because she wasn't wrong. You haunt a space that people pretend doesn't exist. You perform rituals in rooms that aren't sacred. You cry in silence and leave no mark. You fade before you even die. If that isn't a ghost, what is? The girls who leave never send word. Not because they can't. Because they know it's better to disappear than to remind the rest of you that the outside world moves on. Even if they found peace, it would sound like mockery. You used to keep a journal. Scratched thoughts into clay shards, tied them with string, buried them under the mat. Then one day they were gone. No note, no mess, just gone. You didn't ask, because maybe they were never there. Maybe you imagined them. Maybe the mind survives here by cutting pieces of itself off and burying them deep. You keep waiting for a moment of clarity, for something to break, for someone to say, "This is enough." It never comes. So you perform, you clean, you serve, you whisper to statues, you press your lips to dead men's prayers. You wake up and do it all again. And the worst part? You start to forget what part of it was horrifying in the first place. There's a point when the body stops reacting, but the mind keeps going. That's when it gets dangerous. Because you're still there, inside, watching yourself work. Watching your hands move, watching your mouth open and say things you don't believe anymore. You become both puppet and puppeteer. A hollowed out thing with memory stitched to routine. This is what collapse feels like here. Not a scream, not a fall, not some dramatic break, just a pause. Then the next day begins. You stop counting the men. You stop naming the bruises. You stop writing lines on the wall. Not because it's over, but because it's not. You once tried to mark every indignity, every moment that felt like something inside you cracked. You stopped on the 74th. Because it felt ridiculous. Because the next one came before you finished drawing the last. And because it was starting to look more like decoration than defiance. Even your emotions betray you. Anger dulls. Shame numbs. Sadness becomes background noise. What's left is something else. Some grey, tepid thing that pools in your chest and keeps you from feeling too much at once. You call it quiet, but it's not peace. It's the absence of the capacity to care. There was a time you cried every night. You made rituals of it. Covered your face. Bit your knuckles. Curled into yourself like grief was a storm, and you could weather it. Now? You just lie still. The tears don't come. Not because you're healed, because the well is dry. The other girls call it the shift. That moment when your voice changes, when your steps grow lighter, when you stop asking questions. They recognize it. They welcome you into the club of the internally silent. You once saw a girl laughing, really laughing, full and warm, head thrown back, like the sound had escaped before she could catch it. The room went quiet. Even the madam stared. Because joy is dangerous here. It invites questions. Hope, change, and change threatens everything. So you learn to laugh smaller, if at all. You once spent an entire night thinking about the word clean. It came up in a client's request. He wanted you clean. Said it like a compliment. Like you were a dish scrubbed for display. You'd bathed twice already, washed your hands, rinsed your mouth. But still he said it. Be clean for me. You didn't know what he meant. Not really. Maybe he didn't either. Maybe he meant silent, or shaved, or innocent, or obedient. Or maybe he just wanted to pretend that nothing had ever touched you before him. You stared at your arms for a long time after he left. Wondered what he thought he saw when he looked at you. Wondered if there was a version of you that still looked untouched. Wondered if that version was ever real to begin with. Collapse isn't about breaking. It's about becoming too flexible, too soft. You start bending in ways that don't hurt anymore. Start saying yes without blinking. Start hearing yourself agree to things that would have made you sick just weeks ago, and feeling nothing. You want gagged when a man kissed your neck. Now you lean into it. Not because it feels good, because it ends the night faster. That's what survival becomes. Strategy. Not resistance. Efficiency. You learn how to move your hips in a way that shortens the visit. Learn how to look interested just enough. Learn which moans trigger speed and which ones extend things. It's all math now. Emotion is inefficient. You keep thinking about the girl who used to paint her eyelids blue. Said it made her feel like a queen. Like Nefertari. You haven't seen her in days. No one says where she went. Her mat is still there, folded. Her basin still has soap residue. You don't ask. You stopped asking 2 girls ago. Because every disappearance feels like a mirror breaking. And you've run out of mirrors. Even memory becomes dangerous. You stop remembering your mother's voice, your brother's hands, the shape of your own handwriting. These things fade like pigment in the sun. What replaces them? Patterns. The weight of a client's coin pouch. The smell of wine poured from clay jugs. The sound of your own breath catching at the wrong time. The angle of your knee when someone says, slower. These are the new memories, the ones you didn't choose. You once tried to remember your favourite colour. Nothing came, just a blur. Collapse steals colour. That's how you know it's working. And perspective, that's the cruelest part. Because sometimes, in the middle of a session, you catch yourself looking down at the scene, like a god watching ants, detached, observing, and all you feel is pity for him, for yourself, for the moment. You think, this is what intimacy looks like to the broken. And then it passes, and you clean up, and you fold the curtain, and you wait for the next one. There's a silence that isn't quiet. It's heavy. It presses into your skin like a fever you've learned to carry. It sits with you at meals. It follows you down hallways. It waits beside the mat as you undress. It watches you work. Not judgmental. Not kind. Just watching. That's what the collapse becomes eventually. Not pain. Not even numbness. Witness. You're still in there, just farther back. Sometimes you feel yourself blinking from behind your own eyes, as if someone else is steering. You speak without deciding to. You move without permission. A client places your hand somewhere and you leave it there, not because you agree, but because protesting takes energy you don't have. You're not resigned. You're not okay. You're just participating. There's a point when you stop caring about whether something is humiliating. You once made a list of lines that should have broken you. Bark like a jackal. Pretend I'm your brother. Don't make eye contact. Do it like you're grateful. Say you love me. They didn't break you, they barely registered, because by then the collapse had already happened. You were just listening. That's what it becomes. A collection of noise, bodies and words and smells. Some offensive, some familiar. All loud, but your mind stays quiet. You can hear everything and nothing at once. You've learned to hold the sound outside of yourself, like wind against a wall. That's how you survive. You keep everything outside, even yourself. You once stared at a mirror for so long you forgot which side you were on. The reflection mimicked you perfectly, but there was something off in her eyes. Something too still, too willing. You lifted your hand to wave. She didn't. You turned away. The mirror turned with you. There are moments when you do feel something, but it's never the things you expect. Not rage, not sorrow, just grief. Not for what's been done to you, but for what you've lost on the inside. You grieve your own sharpness, your voice, your urgency. You used to be full of words, thoughts, defiance. You used to say that's not fair and mean it. You used to believe fairness mattered. Now someone calls you girl and you nod. Someone calls you filth and you nod. Someone calls you blessed and you nod. Because at this point, every label feels like costume jewellery, cheap, weightless, and easily lost in the sheets. The madam says you're one of the reliable ones now, She means it as praise. You smile, because that's what reliable girls do. You once dreamed of the river. Wide, fast, clean. You stepped into it and let it take you. You didn't fight. You didn't float. You just let the current carry whatever was left of you down to whatever came next. You woke up crying, but you didn't tell anyone, because the idea of crying over a dream seemed indulgent. Some of the girls still cry, quietly, in corners, into cloth they later use to clean floors. You never interrupt, but you don't comfort either, because you don't remember how. Comforting means reaching out, and collapse teaches you to pull in, to shrink, to protect what's left, even if it's barely a flicker. Sometimes you think you've healed. You wake up without dread. You eat without nausea. You bathe and braid your hair and smile at someone, and for a brief, delicate moment you think, maybe I'm whole again. Then someone says, you're lucky to be here. And the flicker dies. Because collapse isn't a hole you climb out of. It's a floor that sinks. And sometimes the light you think is recovery is just the memory of hope, flickering like oil in an empty lamp. The perspective you gain isn't wisdom. It's distance. You begin to see your life not as a tragedy, but as a system. A set of levers. A wheel that spins whether you're screaming or silent. You stop taking it personally. You stop asking why. You stop imagining a better version. Because that version demands a you that no longer exists. You once overheard a client say, she seems so calm, like she's made peace with it. You smiled, because that's what calm looks like from the outside. On the inside, it's a locked room with no door. You're not at peace. You're just no longer looking for exits. There's a kind of peace that comes after you've felt everything, and nothing makes it through anymore. Not the pain, not the shame, not even the fear. It's not strength. Not really, it's vacancy. Your body is still doing all the things. You bathe, you fold the mat, you serve, you nod. You walk the narrow halls like you've lived there for centuries. But inside, there's no audience anymore. The lights are out. The stage is empty. You've exited yourself. And what's left is the version of you that performs on cue. You start to think of yourself in the third person. She did well tonight. She looks tired. She didn't flinch. You're not dissociating. You're archiving. You've become the historian of your own absence. Sometimes you look in the mirror, not to admire, not to check, just to confirm. Confirm that you still exist, that the eyes still open, that the shape is still there. It is. But the person inside is quiet. And what's strange is that quiet starts to feel like safety. Because in the quiet, there are no expectations, no protests, no tears to manage, no rage to bottle. Just this soft, low hum of existence. You used to think survival looked like fire. Now you know it looks like dust that refuses to move. Even the absurdity dulls. A client walks in wearing sandals made of fish skins and asks you to whisper threats in the voice of a crocodile priestess. You don't blink, you just do it. You're not in the room anymore. Your body is. That's enough. The girls talk less now. You notice it. The ones who used to chatter have gone silent. The ones who used to sing hum under their breath instead. The ones who dreamed of escape have stopped counting. Not because they've given up, because they have adjusted their altitude. You live lower now, like a fish that's learned how to breathe deeper than light. Perspective is what's left when emotion burns out. You start to notice things you didn't before. The way the madam avoids looking anyone in the eye after sunset. The way certain coins are heavier, dirtier, marked by hands you don't want to picture. The way men speak to you when they think no one's listening. One said, "I come here because my wife prays too much." You looked at him and said, "So do I." He laughed. You didn't. You start to understand that this place isn't an anomaly. It's a symptom, a pressure valve, a trapdoor built into the structure of the world so the rot can pool somewhere quiet, somewhere acceptable, somewhere off the books. And you're the filter. You're where the filth settles. It's not personal, it's architectural. You once read the word sanctuary carved into a stone near the water. You stood there for a while trying to taste the word. You rolled it in your mouth, imagined what it would be like to say it and mean it. Sanctuary, a place where harm is forbidden. The word felt absurd. You turned away. That's the thing about perspective. It doesn't bring justice. It just explains the map. You see the rooms now not as private spaces, but as identical units of service. You see the hallway as a conveyor belt. You see the girls as interchangeable. And worst of all, you see yourself as no exception. You don't cry about it, you just agree. You once tried to make a list of things you still believed in. You couldn't finish it. Not because you lacked faith, because belief implies effort. And you're tired, the kind of tired that doesn't sleep away, the kind of tired that rewrites how you understand motion, the kind of tired that makes you lie perfectly still after a session, eyes wide, limbs open, waiting for something, anything, to tell you that it matters you survived. But nothing comes, so you sit up, and you start the routine again. Perspective sharpens the horror, but it also dulls the reaction. You understand now that people don't want to see what's happening here. They don't want to fix it. They just want it to be somewhere else. Out of sight, behind curtains, in rooms with walls just thick enough to muffle the sound of girls muttering old songs to themselves so they don't scream. You know what you are to them. A rumour, a warning, a joke, a ghost story told to daughters with the moral. Be careful. As if you weren't. Perspective shows you how long the chain really is, how deep it goes. You see the girls who will replace you. You see the ones who replaced the ones you never met. You see the ones who will never be remembered at all. You used to fear being forgotten. Now you hope for it, because the alternative is being remembered as what they called you. And that's worse. You once stood at the threshold of the brothel, just for a breath of night air. A guard saw you, said nothing, just held your gaze for a moment, then turned away. Permission or pity? You'll never know. You didn't walk out. Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't see the point. That's collapse, not falling down, but sitting still with the door open and choosing not to run. The night thickens. You lie on the mat, limbs loose, eyes open, listening. A breeze slips through the curtain, carries the scent of old ash and something floral, faint, familiar, gone before you can name it. Somewhere, someone coughs. Somewhere else, someone prays. The walls creak, the basin drips, everything continues. You exhale, not relief, just air. You count the breath. Hold it. Release, again, and again. No endings here, no grand lesson, no dawn, just yet. Only this, the soft, slow silence of surviving, and the sound of yourself barely still here. Good night.